Tonight, we journey to a world woven from quiet wisdom, where the rustle of leaves holds ancient truths, and the work of our hands can reveal the path to inner peace. There is nothing you need to do, nothing to fix, no one you need to become. Simply rest now and allow these gentle stories to unfold around you. If this path calls to you, I invite you to subscribe to join our community on this quiet journey of discovery. Tonight, we will explore the nature of companionship and how what we fear may often be our most faithful friend. Let us begin this journey together. Feel your breath, soft and steady. Feel your body, resting gently. Allow yourself to be held in this quiet moment. Our path begins in a quiet corner of this timeless world, amidst the deep, ancient forest. Here, tall trees reach towards the sky, their branches interwoven like old friends, swaying gently in the unseen currents of the air. The forest floor is soft beneath them, a silent carpet of moss and fallen leaves, damp earth yielding slightly to the step. The air is often cool and crisp in the mornings, carrying the clean scent of damp earth and the sweet, resinous aroma of pine. Sunlight, when it finds its way through the dense canopy, does not burst forth, but falls in soft, shifting patterns upon the ground, like a delicate living tapestry, constantly remaking itself. It is a place of profound calm, where the rhythm of life is slow and tied to the natural world, to the sun's silent journey across the sky, to the turning of the seasons. The only sounds are those of nature, the soft murmur of leaves in a breeze, the distant, gentle call of a bird, the hum of unseen bees dancing amongst the wildflowers, and sometimes a rhythmic, steady tap that echoes softly through the trees, a sound of work, of sustenance. In this quiet place, we meet Bhima, the woodcutter, a man of strong build, perhaps in his late 30s, with broad shoulders that speak of years spent in diligent labor, of lifting and felling and splitting. His hands are calloused, rough and strong from the constant grip of his axe, the wood grain seemingly etched into his skin, yet they move with a powerful, deliberate grace, precise in their work, knowing exactly where to strike. His face is weathered by sun and wind, etched with lines that often settle into a thoughtful, often worried expression, a quiet frown that rarely leaves him. His dark hair is kept short, practical, never hindering his sight, never getting in the way of his task. He wears simple, sturdy cloth tunics and trousers, muted earth tones of brown and deep green that blend with the forest around him, making him almost a part of the landscape. Bhima speaks little, his voice a low rumble when he does, as if each word must be carefully weighed before release, too precious to waste on idle chatter. He is a diligent worker, his axe striking true, splitting logs with practiced ease, providing wood for the hearths and homes of his village, for the fires that warm and feed his community, for the structures that shelter his people. He is strong. He is capable. But beneath his strength, Bhima carries a deep-seated fear. This fear for Bhima is not of the wild beasts that roam the forest, though they are many and powerful. It is not of the harsh winter storms that can rage, though they can be fierce and unforgiving. It is not of the gnawing hunger that sometimes visits the lean seasons, though he knows its pangs. No, it is a fear of his own shadow. For Bhima, his shadow is not merely an absence of light, a simple consequence of the sun's angle, but a sinister entity. He perceives it as a dark, silent shape that follows him relentlessly through the forest. An unwelcome companion. A constant presence he cannot shake. In the early morning, as the first golden light filters through the eastern trees, his shadow stretches long and thin before him, an eerie, silent specter leading the way, yet not his own choice. At noon, when the sun climbs highest in the vast blue sky, it shrinks and huddles beneath his feet, a watchful, patient presence, always there, never quite disappearing, a dark pool that mirrored his own disquiet. In the afternoon, as the sun begins its slow descent towards the western peaks, it stretches long behind him, a looming, inescapable follower, a silent reminder that he is never truly alone, never truly free, always observed. Bhima perceives it as something alien, something that clings to him, a constant reminder of a darkness he cannot shake, a silent judge of his every move, always observing, always present, always a part of him that he longed to sever. And so, Bhima tried to avoid it. He would rise before dawn, sometimes even before the first hint of gray light, hoping to outrun its emergence, to begin his work in the pure, unburdened dark, to feel the brief peace of true solitude. But with the first sliver of sun, the first blush of light on the eastern horizon, there it would be, already waiting, already attached, already a part of him. He would carefully choose his felling sites, seeking out the widest clearings where the sun shone directly overhead, hoping to lessen its presence, to make it disappear into a small, dark pool at his feet, where it seemed less threatening, less defined, less of a burden. He would work furiously during those brief, precious hours of noon, when the sun was highest and his shadow was at its shortest, its power seemingly diminished, its form almost indistinguishable from the earth itself. He would hurry through the dense parts of the forest, where the canopy was thick and the ground was a patchwork of light and shade, hoping its form would be broken, fragmented, less whole, less solid, less threatening, easier to ignore. But it was always there, always, a constant, dark companion, unwavering in its vigil, unyielding in its presence, and with each failed attempt to escape it, with each moment he found it still by his side, Bhima's anxiety grew, a quiet knot tightening in his chest. His broad shoulders would tense, his brow would furrow deeper, a visible worry etched upon his face. He would glance over his shoulder, a quick, furtive movement, as if caught in a silent chase, a silent battle he could never win, a silent burden he could never shed. He carried this burden, this quiet fear, with him through every sun-drenched clearing, every dappled path, every solitary moment in the deep, whispering woods. He longed for a moment of true, unburdened solitude, a moment where he was truly, completely alone. Sometimes we too carry fears, unseen burdens that follow us through our days. They are not always tangible, not always visible, but they are always there, just beneath the surface, or just behind us. We try to outrun them, to outwit them, to hide from them in the bright light or the deep shadows of our lives. We believe that if we can just make them disappear, if we can just escape their presence, then true peace will be found. Then we will finally be free. But they remain. For a moment now, let us simply acknowledge what we carry. There is no need to push it away, no need to change it, no need to understand it fully. Just breathe. Feel your breath, soft and steady, flowing in and flowing out. Feel your body resting gently, supported by the earth beneath you, held in this quiet space. Allow yourself to be held in this quiet moment. We simply acknowledge the presence of what is exactly as it is. One late afternoon, the sun began its slow, inevitable descent, painting the western sky in hues of soft orange, muted gold, and deep, evolving rose. Bhima had found a magnificent old tree fallen in a recent storm, and its timber was too valuable to leave to rot, too precious to waste. He had pushed himself, working past the usual hour when the forest grew quiet and the light began its rapid fade. The air grew cooler, carrying a new, damp scent that spoke of the approaching evening, of the earth cooling after the day's warmth. The sounds of the forest softened, growing hushed, preparing for the night, the birds settling into their nests. The deep shadows began to lengthen, reaching like long, ethereal fingers across the forest floor, merging with each other, becoming vast, undefined pools of darkness. Bhima worked on, his axe ringing out with a more urgent rhythm, a desperate sound, aware of the encroaching twilight, aware of the growing presence behind him, pressing in on all sides. He felt the familiar, immense form of his shadow, stretching now to an immense, distorted size, like a giant following close at his heels, looming, threatening, inescapable. His heart beat a little faster, a quick, anxious thrumming beneath his ribs. He swung his axe, trying to ignore it, trying to finish his work before the last light left the sky, before the darkness swallowed everything. The sun dipped lower, then lower still, finally slipping behind the distant, ancient peaks. The forest deepened into shades of indigo and violet, the trees becoming mere silhouettes against the fading glow. The last rays of light, once golden and warm, now turned to a pale, ethereal silver that softened the edges of everything, blurring the lines between what was real and what was merely a trick of the fading day. Bhima paused, his task almost done, the last log split, the last piece of timber ready. He wiped his brow with the back of his calloused hand, his breath coming a little harder. He looked behind him, expecting to see the menacing, elongated form of his shadow, waiting there, watching, a dark shape against the dimming forest. But it was no longer there. The deepening twilight had swallowed it whole. The shadows of the trees, the shadows of the rocks, the shadows of the earth itself had all merged into one vast, all-encompassing darkness, and his own shadow, the one he had feared, the one he had tried so desperately to escape, had simply dissolved, disappeared into the greater, deeper night, no longer distinguishable, no longer separate. For a long, long moment, Bhima stood utterly still amidst the quiet of the forest. The air was cool against his face, a gentle caress, a soft breath of evening. The forest was silent, save for the soft, almost inaudible whisper of the wind through the highest leaves, a lullaby for the coming night. There was no shadow. He was truly, completely shadowless. He was alone, in a way he had never been before, and in that profound shadowlessness, a quiet, unexpected loneliness washed over him. An aching emptiness settled in his chest, a hollow space where a familiar presence had always been, even if it was a feared one. What he had perceived as a sinister follower, a constant burden, a relentless pursuer, had been all along a presence, a steady, unwavering companion. It had been there through every sunrise, announcing the new day. It had been there through every midday sun, a silent witness to his labor, a dark reflection of his every effort. It had been there through every fading twilight, a faithful shadow of his own journey, always by his side. It had been a part of him, always. It had walked with him, worked with him, rested with him. It had never left his side, and in its sudden, complete absence, Bhima felt its quiet, profound loyalty. He realized, with a soft, aching clarity, that he had been running from his most steadfast friend. A realization, gentle and clear, settled in his heart like the dew on the forest floor, refreshing and quiet. The very thing he had feared, the very thing he had tried so desperately to escape, was the one constant, faithful presence in his solitary world. He stood there, in the quiet darkness, the axe now resting gently in his hand, no longer a tool of labor, but a silent companion itself. He simply stood and allowed this gentle understanding to unfold within him. The deep-seated fear, which had clung to him like his own shadow for so long, began to loosen its grip, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of acceptance. A soft, unfolding peace settled over him, like the quiet of the deep forest itself. Sometimes what we fear the most is simply a part of ourselves, waiting to be seen, waiting to be accepted. A faithful companion, always there, always walking beside us, in the bright light and in the encroaching dark. And when we stop running, when we turn to face what follows us, when we allow ourselves to simply be present with its presence, we may find not an enemy, but a friend, a quiet, constant presence holding us in the deep, soft rhythm of life. We journey now from the deep, quiet shadows of the forest, where Bhima found an unexpected companion, to the sun-dappled groves, alive with the hum of 1,000 wings, where Mira, a nimble honey-gatherer, seeks a different kind of sweetness. Her path leads her high into the ancient trees, where wild bees build their intricate combs, heavy with the golden essence of the land. Mira is a woman of quick, observant eyes, ever scanning the highest branches, her movements fluid and silent as she ascends, almost a part of the forest canopy itself. Her long, dark hair is always braided tightly, a practical shield against the clinging branches, the curious bees. She wears simple, light garments in muted greens and browns, blending seamlessly with the leaves and bark, a testament to her deep connection with this natural world. Her work is one of courage and patience. She navigates the rough bark, the swaying limbs, the dizzying heights, reaching for the hidden treasures that the bees have so diligently crafted. She moves with a graceful agility, a silent dance among the branches, her hands deft and practiced as she carefully coaxes the rich, dripping comb from its secret place. The air around her is thick with the sweet, intoxicating scent of nectar and propolis, a fragrance that speaks of wildflowers, of warm sun, of the very essence of life. The soft, incessant hum of the bees is a constant companion, a lullaby of industry, a gentle reminder of the vibrant life teeming all around her. Mira gathers this liquid gold, this concentrated sunshine with reverence, placing it carefully into woven baskets, her heart often swelling with a quiet sense of satisfaction for the bounty she has found. She brings it down from the trees, a precious offering, a gift from the wild heart of the forest to the village below, where it is shared and savored. Yet, despite her intimate connection to this profound sweetness, despite the rich aroma that permeates her very being, Mira carries a quiet sorrow, a profound longing. For many seasons now, the honey she gathers, the exquisite treasure she risks so much to collect, offers her no taste. Her mouth, once alive with the complex notes of wild jasmine, of sun-drenched clover, of earthy buckwheat, is now numb to it all. It is a cruel irony, a silent affliction. She can see the golden hue, feel its thick, warm texture on her tongue, smell its rich perfume, but the sweetness itself, the very essence of its being, eludes her. Her taste buds remain dull, unresponsive, as if a veil has fallen over them, separating her from the very joy she provides for others. Everything she eats, everything she drinks, holds the same flat, uninspired blandness. Even the most pungent herbs, the ripest fruits, the freshest spring water, taste like nothing, like dust on her tongue. It is as if the vibrant colors of her inner world have faded, leaving only a muted gray landscape where flavor once danced. She has tried everything, with a quiet desperation that only those who have lost a cherished sense can understand. She has sought out the rarest flowers, climbing to the highest, most secluded groves, convinced that a new, more potent nectar would surely awaken her dormant senses. She has journeyed to distant parts of the forest, seeking out different species of bees, hoping their unique honey would hold the key to her awakening. She has eaten only the freshest, most potent comb, still warm from the hive, believing its raw vitality might break through the numbness. She has fasted for days, cleansing her body, hoping to reset her palate, to strip away whatever unseen barrier prevented her from experiencing the simple pleasure of taste. But each attempt ended in the same quiet disappointment. The honey, no matter how pure, how rich, how fresh, remained tasteless to her, a beautiful, golden void. Her longing deepened with each passing day. She watched the villagers savoring her honey, their faces alight with pleasure, their murmurs of delight a bittersweet torment to her own untouched palate. She saw the children dip their fingers into the sticky comb, their eyes wide with joy, and a pang of deep loneliness would pass through her. How could she bring such joy to others, yet be utterly cut off from it herself? How could she dedicate her life to gathering sweetness, yet taste none of it? Her work, once a source of quiet pride, now felt like a hollow echo, a labor performed by hands that created abundance for a world she could no longer truly share. She yearned for that simple sensation, that burst of pure, unadulterated sweetness that she knew in her heart existed, even if her own senses denied it. She yearned to reconnect with the very essence of her craft, the very heart of the forest's offering. Sometimes we too chase after a feeling, a sensation, a form of sweetness that seems to evade us no matter how diligently we pursue it. We believe that if we just find the right source, the perfect condition, the precise method, then what we seek will finally be ours. We look outside ourselves, convinced that the answer lies in a different grove, a different flower, a different path, and when it doesn't appear, when the longing persists, a quiet sorrow can settle in our hearts, a feeling of being cut off from the very essence of life's richness. For a moment now, let us simply rest in this quiet space. Feel your breath, soft and steady, flowing in and flowing out. Feel your body resting gently, supported by the earth beneath you. held in this quiet moment. We simply allow ourselves to be present with the desires we carry, without needing to fulfill them, without needing to change them. Just breathe, just be. One particularly warm morning, Mira climbed higher than usual, a new, daring ascent to a hive rumored to hold the richest, most fragrant honey in the entire forest. The sun beat down, turning the leaves to molten gold, and the air was thick and heavy, portending a change in the weather. As she carefully reached for the comb, her foot slipped on a patch of damp moss. She recovered quickly, her agile hands finding purchase, but not before a cloud of angry bees swarmed, their quiet hum turning into a furious buzz. She felt a sharp, searing pain as a dozen stings pierced her skin, small, fiery needles injecting their venom. Her hands swelled quickly, turning red and throbbing, making it impossible to grip the rough bark. To continue her work, she slowly, carefully descended, her body aching, her spirit heavy. For the next few days, her hands were too swollen, too painful to work. The stings throbbed, a constant reminder of her failed attempt, of her desperate longing. She sat quietly beneath the shade of a wide-leafed tree, her usual tools resting uselessly beside her. She watched the world around her, unable to participate in the active pursuit of sweetness. She watched the light shift through the leaves. She listened to the distant murmur of the river, and she watched the bees. The diligent bees, they flew past her, a steady stream of tiny, shimmering bodies, moving with unwavering purpose. They did not gather honey for themselves alone. They gathered for the hive, for the queen, for the future generations. They built their intricate waxen cells, each hexagonal chamber a perfect vessel, a testament to their tireless work. They filled these cells, drop by golden drop, with the nectar they had collected, transforming it through their own inner alchemy into the rich amber honey. Mira watched them, hour after quiet hour. She saw their tireless labor, their unwavering focus, their complete dedication to the creation of sweetness, and a quiet insight bloomed within her, as soft and gentle as a new blossom unfurling in the morning light. The bees never tasted their own creation, not in the way a human would. They labored, they gathered, they transformed, they stored. Their purpose was in the making, in the giving, in the sustenance of the colony. Their life was a continuous act of creation, of contribution, of selfless service. They did not pause to savor each drop, to experience the burst of flavor for themselves. Their sweetness was in the doing, in the constant, unwavering flow of their work. Mira looked down at her swollen, throbbing hands. She had always sought the taste of honey for herself, believing that only through personal consumption could she find the sweetness she so deeply craved. She had measured her success by the sensation on her own tongue, by the pleasure she could derive from the final product. But the bees, in their simple, profound wisdom, showed her a different path. They never tasted the honey, yet their entire existence was dedicated to its creation. Their lives were filled with the very essence of sweetness, simply by being the source of it, by making it, by offering it. A quiet understanding settled in her heart, like the dew settling on the leaves at dawn. The sweetness she sought for herself, the flavor she believed had abandoned her, was not something to be consumed. It was something to be created. It was present always, in the act of her own diligent work, in the careful gathering, in the offering to others. The joy was not in the private consumption, but in the selfless creation. It was in the hum of the bees, in the golden light filtering through the leaves, in the scent of nectar on the air, in the very act of bringing forth such a precious gift. The sweetness was not a destination, but the journey itself, the unfolding process of giving. Her hands still ached, but the pain no longer felt like a punishment. It felt like a gentle reminder, a quiet instruction. She watched the bees, their tireless flight, their unwavering purpose, and a soft smile touched her lips. She could still gather the honey. She could still bring its golden richness to the village. She could still offer its warmth and nourishment to others. And in that offering, in that selfless act of creation, she would find a deeper, more profound sweetness than any she had ever hoped to taste on her own tongue. It was a sweetness that transcended mere sensation, a sweetness born of connection, of contribution, of the quiet, boundless generosity of a gentle heart. Sometimes we seek joy, we seek fulfillment, we seek a deep sense of sweetness in what we can acquire, what we can consume, what we can hold for ourselves. We believe that happiness lies in the perfect experience, the perfect sensation. But perhaps, like Mira, we are called to look beyond our own longing, beyond our own desires for personal pleasure. Perhaps true sweetness, a sweetness that never fades, a sweetness that always satisfies, is found not in the taking, but in the making, not in the consumption, but in the creation, not in the holding, but in the open-hearted giving of what we have, of what we are. The joy, the true, lasting joy, is always present in the creation, in the offering, in the quiet, selfless act of bringing forth beauty and sustenance for the world around us. And in that act, we find ourselves abundantly nourished, profoundly connected, and deeply, truly sweet. Our path leads us now from the sun-dappled groves, where the hum of bees whispers ancient truths, to the quiet banks of a wide, slow-moving river. Here, the water, heavy and brown, carries the stories of the land, flowing with a patient, unhurried grace. This is the world of Sonu, the clay digger. Sonu was a man of the earth, perhaps in his early 30s, with a frame made solid by years of heavy labor. His hands, broad and strong, were perpetually dusted with the pale, fine clay he extracted from the riverbed. His simple tunic and dhoti, woven from coarse, undyed cotton, were often smudged with the rich, damp earth, a testament to his tireless work. He moved with a grounded, deliberate step, his feet finding purchase on the slippery banks, his body attuned to the subtle shifts of the river. When he spoke, his voice was slow, careful, sometimes hesitant, as if he weighed each word in his mind, just as he weighed each lump of clay in his hands, assessing its texture, its purity, its potential. Sonu's gaze was earnest, searching, often directed towards the river itself, a wistful expression softening his strong features. He spent his days extracting the raw material, the very foundation from which the village potters would craft their beautiful vessels. He would dig the clay, clean it, prepare it, and deliver it to their workshops, watching with a quiet admiration as their skilled fingers transformed the shapeless earth into graceful bowls, sturdy pots, and delicate figurines. But within Sonu, a deep disquiet stirred. He felt a pervasive sense of formlessness in his own life. a raw, unshaped existence that seemed to lack the purpose and definition of the finished creations he helped to bring forth. He was merely the earth, he thought, the unrefined, unchosen material, waiting for a potter's hands that never came for him. He saw the potter's lives as clearly defined, their purpose manifest in every finished piece, while his own felt like a formless lump, useful only for others' shaping. This feeling of inadequacy, of being perpetually unfinished, weighed heavily on his heart. He longed for a sense of form, a clear purpose that was his own, not merely a preparatory step for someone else's art. Sometimes, when the potters had finished for the day and the riverbank was quiet, Sonu would take a small, moist lump of clay and try to shape it himself. His strong, calloused fingers, so adept at digging, at discerning the right vein of earth, seemed clumsy, unsuited for the delicate art of shaping. The clay, so responsive in the hands of a master, resisted his clumsy efforts, crumbling at the edges, collapsing under his touch, refusing to hold the form he imagined in his mind. He would try to mold a simple cup, a small bird, perhaps a leaf, but the forms would invariably twist, crack, or slump back into an indistinct mass. Each failure was a small echo of his deeper fear, that he too was destined to remain unformed, without a true vessel for his own spirit, merely raw material, never reaching the state of completeness or inherent value. His frustration would deepen, settling like the fine clay dust on his skin, a persistent reminder of his perceived lack. He longed for the clarity of a finished form, the certainty of a defined purpose. We too often carry this longing within us. We seek to define ourselves, to find a clear shape for our lives, a perfect form for our purpose. We can feel restless, incomplete, or inadequate when our path seems unformed, when our purpose is not yet clear, when we feel like raw material, waiting for a hand to give us definition. We yearn for a finished product, a clear identity, a sense of belonging within a rigid structure. For a moment now, let us simply rest in this quiet space. Feel your breath, soft and steady, flowing in and flowing out. Feel your body resting gently, supported by the earth beneath you, held in this quiet moment. We simply allow ourselves to be present with these desires for form, for purpose, for definition, without needing to fulfill them, without needing to change them. Just breathe, just be. The quiet season of the monsoon arrived, bringing with it the slow, steady rhythm of falling rain. The sky would weep for days, sometimes for weeks, turning the river into a swollen, muddy torrent that surged against its banks, erasing familiar pathways, reshaping the very landscape. Sonu's work paused during these times. The river was too powerful to dig, the clay too wet to handle, and the potter's kilns were often too damp to fire. He spent these days indoors, or sometimes when the rain would lighten to a gentle drizzle, he would sit beneath the shelter of an overhang, watching the river. He watched its ceaseless flow, its immense, unhurried power, and he watched his piles of unshaped clay, the mounds he had dug and left by the river's edge, waiting for brighter days, now exposed to the relentless interaction of the rising water. The river, swollen and brown, moved with an unstoppable force, a liquid hand reshaping the very banks, gently, ceaselessly. Sonu watched as the water met his carefully piled mounds of clay. Some of the clay, packed densely over time, solidified under the constant pressure and moisture. becoming part of the river's new edge, a solid foundation against the current. It held its ground, firm and unwavering, though it remained unshaped by human hands. It simply was a part of the bank, defining the river's flow. Other piles, softer, looser, gradually surrendered to the water's embrace. They dissolved slowly, peacefully, blending back into the swirling currents, becoming one with the river's flow, carried downstream to nourish distant banks, to settle into new forms elsewhere. They did not resist. They did not hold rigidly to their original shape. They simply returned to their essential nature, becoming part of a larger movement, a grander transformation. And some clay, nestled just so, with subtle variations in their slopes and textures, did something else entirely. They gently redirected the water, creating small, temporary channels, guiding the flow around them, shaping the river's immediate path without ever becoming a rigid, defined form themselves. They didn't become pots or bowls, but in their raw, unshaped state, they influenced, they interacted, they served a purpose in the unfolding dance of the river. They were not fixed, yet they had an undeniable presence, a quiet agency in the larger system. Sonu watched day after quiet day as the river engaged with his unformed clay. He saw how the clay, without any conscious effort, without any rigid design, simply was in the world. It was responsive, it was present, it interacted, it held, it dissolved, it guided. It did not need to be shaped by a potter to have its own way of being, its own purpose, its own profound interaction with the world around it. Its value was not in a static form, but in its dynamic being, its quiet responsiveness to the river's touch, to the ceaseless flow of life. A quiet realization dawned within Sonu, as soft and gentle as the first light breaking through the monsoon clouds. He had been so focused on the idea of a finished form, a defined purpose, that he'd overlooked the profound value of simply being. The clay, in its raw, unshaped state, was not useless, not without purpose. It was not waiting to be made into something. It was something, in constant interaction with its world, responsive and alive. It had its own way of meeting the world, its own quiet power, its own inherent value, simply by existing as it was. Not everything needed a rigid form to have value. Not everything needed to be a finished pot to contribute, to interact, to be. The river, in its wisdom, did not demand that the clay be anything other than what it was. It engaged with it, transformed it, or was transformed by it, in its natural, unforced state. The clay, too, simply allowed itself to be, allowing the river to work upon it, with it, through it. Sonu looked down at his own hands, still dusted with the pale earth. He had felt formless, purposeless, like mere raw material. But perhaps, like the clay by the river, he too had his own way of being in the world, his own purpose, his own quiet interaction with the flow of life, even without a perfectly defined shape. Perhaps his value was not in a rigid form he had yet to achieve, but in the very essence of his being, in his responsiveness, in his grounded presence. The feeling of inadequacy, of being incomplete, began to soften within him. He was not a finished pot, perhaps, but he was the earth itself, capable of holding, capable of dissolving, capable of guiding the flow in his own quiet way. He did not need to force a shape upon himself, but could simply allow himself to be present, to respond to the currents of life, to find his purpose in the unforced, dynamic interaction with the world around him. And in that quiet understanding, a deep peace settled in Sonu's heart. He was not merely raw material. He was the very earth, alive and responsive, full of potential, finding its own way of being in the world, without needing to be anything other than what it already was. Sometimes, we believe that our value, our purpose, our very meaning lies in becoming something specific, something defined, something finished. We strive to create a rigid form for our lives, believing that only then will we be complete, whole, and truly valuable. But perhaps, like Sonu, we are invited to look beyond the need for a fixed form, to embrace the beauty and purpose that resides in the unshaped, the raw, the dynamically responsive nature of our own being. Perhaps our true value is not in what we become, but in what we are, in our capacity to interact, to flow, to simply be present, allowing life to work with us, through us, and upon us, exactly as we are. The profound purpose, the deepest meaning, can be found not in a rigid form, but in the quiet, unfolding dance of simply being. And now, our journey takes a gentle turn, leading us from the quiet banks of the river and the wisdom of unshaped earth into the heart of a small, interconnected village. Here, in the soft glow of hearth fires and the quiet rhythm of daily life, we meet Kamala. Kamala, the firekeeper's daughter, was a young woman with bright, attentive eyes and a quick, graceful step. Her dark hair was often tied back with a simple ribbon, and she moved through the village in a clean sari, usually in a soft red or orange hue, a reflection of the very flames she tended. Her voice was gentle, almost melodic, a quiet song carried on the morning air as she greeted her neighbors. But beneath that gentle melody, there often lay a subtle undertone of weariness, a quiet despair that pressed upon her heart. For generations, Kamala's family had held the sacred duty of keeping the village fire alive. Every morning, before the sun had fully kissed the eastern peaks, Kamala would rise. She would stir the embers in the central hearth, coaxing them back to life with a gentle breath and a few dry twigs. Once a small flame danced, she would carefully transfer a glowing ember onto a piece of dried cow dung, a perfect, slow-burning vessel. Then, with a quick, graceful step, she would begin her daily rounds, carrying this precious spark from house to house, rekindling the cooking fires, warming the cold homes, bringing light to the sleepy village. It was a duty she performed with diligence and devotion, a rhythm that had shaped her life since she was a small child. Yet, as she walked, a quiet worry grew within her, a fear that gnawed at the edges of her peace. With each ember she shared, with each household fire she ignited, Kamala felt her own inner flame diminishing. She saw herself as a vessel, constantly pouring out her warmth, her light, her very essence, fearing that one day there would be nothing left. She worried that if she stopped, if she held back even a single spark, the village would grow cold, its hearths dark, its people left without warmth or comfort. So, she hurried. She moved with a silent urgency, her steps quick, her focus intense. She would push aside her own hunger, ignore the chill that sometimes settled deep in her bones, forgo a quiet moment of rest, all to ensure that every home received its share of the precious fire. She was relentless in her giving, believing that only through constant, unceasing effort could the village thrive. She saw her own spirit as a finite resource, a candle burning down, its wax slowly but surely consumed by the light it offered to others. Her days were a blur of motion, a cycle of giving and worrying. She would return to her own hearth at dusk, often feeling depleted, her energy drained, her heart heavy with the weight of her responsibility. She would look at the central fire, the source of all the village's warmth, and wonder how much longer she could draw from it, how much longer her own spirit could sustain the endless giving. The fear was a cold ember in her own heart, even as she carried warmth to others. She felt she was being consumed by her sacred duty, her own light slowly fading away. Perhaps, like Kamala, you too have felt this weight. Perhaps you have given so much of yourself, your time, your energy, your compassion, that you fear your own reserves are dwindling. You worry that if you do not constantly tend to the needs of others, if you do not continue to pour yourself out, that something essential will be lost, that those around you will suffer. You may feel a quiet weariness, a sense of depletion, even as you strive to bring warmth and light to your world. Take a moment now, a moment of breath. Allow yourself to consider your own reserves, not with judgment, not with a need to change anything, but simply with a gentle awareness. Feel the soft inhale, the gentle exhale. Are you holding your breath, fearing that the next breath may not come as easily? Or can you allow the breath to flow, knowing that each one arrives effortlessly, naturally, without needing to be forced or hoarded? Just breathe, just be. One morning, the air was particularly crisp, and a thin, white mist still clung to the ground, blurring the edges of the familiar path. Kamala was hurrying, perhaps a little more than usual, eager to finish her rounds before the sun had fully burned away the dew. Her thoughts were on the last few houses, on the promise of a hot cup of tea, on the quiet moment of rest she longed for. Her movements, usually so graceful, were a little less precise, a little more rushed. As she walked, her foot caught on an unseen root hidden beneath the mist. She stumbled, a small gasp escaping her lips. The piece of dried cow dung, with its precious glowing ember, slipped from her grasp. It tumbled to the ground, rolling gently for a moment before coming to rest on a patch of dry grass at the edge of the path. Kamala froze, her heart leaping into her throat. A wave of panic washed over her. The ember, her responsibility, the very life of the village lay exposed. She imagined it dying, fading to ash, leaving a cold, dark void. She feared the village would indeed grow cold, all because of her single, careless mistake. She rushed forward, ready to scoop up the ember, to smother it, to protect it from the hungry air. But before she could reach it, before she could intervene, something else happened. The ember, instead of simply dying, instead of fading to nothing, found a new embrace. The dry grass, brittle and receptive, caught the spark. A tiny flicker, no bigger than a firefly, appeared. And then, instead of shrinking, instead of disappearing, the flame gently spread. It moved with a quiet, unhurried grace, a ripple of quiet orange light across the ground. It did not consume all at once. It tasted, it reached, it found new fuel in the dry blades of grass, in the fallen leaves, in the unseen twigs beneath. Kamala watched, mesmerized. Her frantic urge to intervene, to save, to control, slowly subsided. She stood still, Her breath held, her eyes wide. The flame was not diminishing, it was not dying. It was growing. It was carrying itself, gracefully, silently, across the ground, finding new sustenance, new life, wherever it went. It needed no tending hand, no careful breath to coax it into being. It simply was, and in its being, it expanded, it shared, it transformed. A profound lesson, as soft and warm as the spreading flame itself, unfurled in Kamala's heart. She had believed that fire diminished by sharing, that each spark given meant less for the giver. But here, before her very eyes, was the living truth. Fire does not diminish by sharing. It finds new fuel wherever it goes. It grows. It spreads its warmth. True giving does not deplete. It generates more. It creates new connections, new warmth, new light, in places that were once cold and dark. The fire, in its essence, was an act of generosity, a constant unfolding. It did not hold on to its heat, fearing it would lose itself. No, it released its warmth, and in that very act of release, it found new fuel, new life, new ways to expand its being. It was an endless wellspring, not a finite resource. Kamala looked at her hands, no longer seeing them as vessels constantly emptying, but as conduits for a boundless energy. Her inner fire was not a candle burning down, but a spark that, when shared, ignited countless other sparks, creating a network of warmth and light that was far greater than any single flame could ever be. The quiet despair, the subtle undertone of weariness that had weighed on her heart began to lift. A sense of lightness, of expansive peace, settled in its place. She understood now that her duty was not a burden of depletion, but a sacred dance of generation. Each ember she carried was not a loss, but an opportunity for the fire to find new fuel, to expand its warmth, to manifest its boundless nature in the world. She was not giving away her own light, but participating in the endless, radiant generosity of life itself. Her own inner fire, far from diminishing, was amplified by every spark she shared, finding new strength, new purpose, new connection with every act of giving. And in that quiet understanding, a deep, abiding peace settled in Kamala's heart. She was not merely a firekeeper's daughter. She was a participant in the profound, interconnected dance of warmth and light, a living testament to the truth that true giving generates more, not less. Sometimes we believe that giving of ourselves, sharing our light, our love, our energy, will diminish us. We fear that our own reserves are finite, that if we give too much, we will be left empty, cold, and without. But perhaps, like Kamala, we are invited to look beyond this fear, to recognize the profound truth that lies at the heart of generosity. The light that we share does not consume us. It ignites new light, finds new fuel, and in that very act of giving, it expands, it grows, it connects us to a boundless wellspring of warmth and compassion that is ever present, ever renewing. True giving, we learn, is not a depletion, but an amplification. It is a sacred dance where the act of offering creates more, where the warmth shared returns to us in countless new forms, ever expanding, ever growing. Our own inner fire is not diminished by sharing. It finds new fuel wherever it goes, growing and spreading its warmth, illuminating not just the world around us, but the quiet, radiant core of our own being. And in that quiet understanding, a deep, abiding peace settled in Kamala's heart. She was not merely a firekeeper's daughter. She was a participant in the profound, interconnected dance of warmth and light. a living testament to the truth that true giving generates more, not less. Sometimes we believe that giving of ourselves, sharing our light, our love, our energy, will diminish us. We fear that our own reserves are finite, that if we give too much, we will be left empty, cold, and without. But perhaps, like Kamala, we are invited to look beyond this fear, to recognize the profound truth that lies at the heart of generosity. The light that we share does not consume us. It ignites new light, finds new fuel, and in that very act of giving, it expands, it grows, it connects us to a boundless wellspring of warmth and compassion that is ever present, ever renewing. True giving, we learn, is not a depletion, but an amplification. It is a sacred dance where the act of offering creates more, where the warmth shared returns to us in countless new forms, ever expanding, ever growing. Our own inner fire is not diminished by sharing. It finds new fuel wherever it goes, growing and spreading its warmth, illuminating not just the world around us, but the quiet, radiant core of our own being. Tonight, we journey to a world of resonant sound and profound silence, where the steady rhythm of our lives can sometimes be obscured by the very noise we create. Our path now leads us to Tejo, the drum maker, whose workshop, nestled at the edge of the forest, once hummed and vibrated with the deep, vibrant sounds of his magnificent creations. Tejo was a man of focused intensity. His hands, strong and adept, were scarred with the marks of his craft, each nick and callus a testament to years spent shaping wood, stretching hide, and tuning membranes. His lean build spoke of the tireless energy he poured into his work, and his dark, curly hair was often dusted with the fine shavings of exotic woods or the delicate fragments of prepared animal hides. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, yet resonant, like the soft thrum of a perfectly tuned drum. But often his eyes would be distant, as if listening to an unseen rhythm, a sound just beyond the grasp of ordinary hearing. He created drums of every kind, large, ceremonial drums that pulsed with the deep heartbeat of the earth, their skins thick and resonant. Smaller, handheld drums that chattered like forest birds, their rhythms intricate and quick. Tall, slender drums that sang with a clear, piercing tone, their voices cutting through the air like a mountain wind. His workshop was a symphony of possibility, filled with the rich smell of wood, cured hide, and a faint, sweet aroma of the oils he used to condition the drum skins. Mallets hung in neat rows, each carefully crafted for a specific sound, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with the potential for music. Yet, despite the constant rhythm he crafted, despite the magnificent sounds that poured from his hands and filled his world, a profound silence haunted Tejo. It was a silence not of peace, but of absence, an echoing void deep within his own life, a space he constantly tried to fill. He listened to the drums, he tuned them, he played them, he taught others to play them, hoping that the external sounds would somehow seep into that inner emptiness and quiet it. But the more sound he created, the louder the inner silence seemed to become, pressing in around the edges of his bustling rhythmic world. He worked tirelessly, driven by this unspoken need. He would spend long nights selecting just the right wood for a drum's body, carving it with patient, deliberate strokes. He would carefully prepare the hides, stretching them with an almost sacred reverence, knowing that each skin held a song waiting to be released. He explored new rhythms, learned ancient beats, and experimented with innovative designs, always seeking that perfect sound, that ultimate resonance that might finally reach the quiet, aching space within him. His days were a blur of activity, the rhythmic tap of his carving tools against wood, the soft whisper of sandpaper smoothing a drum's edge, the percussive slap of hide being stretched taut, the low hum of his own voice as he tested a new tone. These were the constant companions of his external world. He taught apprentices, his patience endless as he guided their hands to find the true voice of the drum. He performed at village festivals, his powerful rhythms moving the dancers, stirring the hearts of the listeners. But when the performance ended and the last echo faded, the quiet void would return, perhaps even more pronounced in the sudden absence of so much sound. He believed that if he could just create enough sound, if he could just find the right rhythm, the silence within him would finally be overcome, dissolved by the sheer force of external music. He filled his home, his workshop, and even his mind with sound, with plans for new drums, with memories of past performances, with the endless pursuit of the perfect beat. He was, in essence, running from himself, trying to outrun the quiet, trying to outcreate the emptiness that felt like a growing chasm in his soul. We, too, often fill our lives with sound, with activity, with the external, hoping to quiet an inner disquiet. We chase achievements, seek distractions, immerse ourselves in endless tasks, believing that if we are busy enough, loud enough, productive enough, the quiet aches within us will somehow disappear. But perhaps, like Tejo, we are invited to listen more deeply, not to the cacophony outside, but to the subtle whisper that seeks our attention from within. Let us pause now, a moment to quiet our own minds, to lay down the external sounds, the external demands, the endless stream of thoughts. Allow yourself to simply rest. Here, in this quiet moment, we are invited to listen to the soft rhythm of our breath. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest, the quiet movement of air. Not a sound made, not a rhythm forced, but a sound that simply is. A quiet, constant rhythm, always present, always available. Listen to the soft inhale, the gentle exhale. Just breathe, just be. Rest in this quiet, steady pulse. Then, one season, something unexpected occurred. It began subtly, unseen, a quiet, creeping presence that Tejo, so attuned to sound, failed to notice. Termites, tiny and tireless, had found their way into his workshop. They worked silently, meticulously, from within, hollowing out the very heart of his creations. One morning, Tejo walked into his workshop, ready to begin his day. He reached for a ceremonial drum, a masterpiece of his craft, intending to test its resonance. As his fingers brushed the taut hide, the drum, instead of offering its usual resistance, simply crumbled. The wood, once solid and strong, was hollowed out, a mere shell, its interior reduced to fine dust. He stared in disbelief, then horror. He touched another drum, and it too collapsed under his gentle touch. One by one, he discovered them, his beloved creations, reduced to fragile, silent husks. The large drums, the small drums, the tall ones, all of them were gone, destroyed from within by a silent, unseen force. His workshop, once a vibrant symphony of wood and hide, was now an empty, silent space. The mallets hung uselessly, their purpose gone. The air, once alive with potential sound, now felt heavy with an oppressive quiet. The silence he had tried so desperately to outrun, to fill with endless rhythm, had now consumed his entire external world. There was no drum to make, no new skin to stretch, no mallet to swing. There was nothing left but the wreckage, the dust, and the profound, absolute silence that pressed in around him. Tejo sat amidst the wreckage, on the dusty floor of what had once been his vibrant, noisy workshop. The silence was absolute, a vast, echoing chamber that swallowed even the memory of rhythm. He felt a deep ache, a familiar void, but this time there was no drum to make, no new skin to stretch, no mallet to swing. He simply sat, and the silence pressed in around him. For a long, long moment, he noticed nothing but the quiet, no external sound, no internal thought, just the vast, overwhelming absence of sound. Then, slowly, softly, he began to feel it, a gentle thrumming beneath his ribs, a steady pulse. Thump, 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 thump. It was his own heart, beating its silent, constant rhythm. He had been so busy creating sound outside, so consumed by the need to fill the external world with his craft, that he had forgotten the drum that was already playing within. He had overlooked the most fundamental rhythm of all. He listened. He simply listened to the quiet drumming, the steady beat of his own life. It was not loud, not commanding, not a performance for others. It was simply there, constant, unwavering, a quiet testament to his own existence. The void he had tried so desperately to fill with external sound was not truly empty. It was simply waiting for him to turn his attention inward, to hear the drum that had been beating all along, patiently, silently, at the very core of his being. In that quiet moment, amidst the dust and the ruins of his external creations, Tejo understood. The true drum, the most essential rhythm, was not something he had to make or to seek outside himself. It was not dependent on wood or hide, on mallets or skilled hands. It was always present, always beating, the fundamental pulse of his own life, the quiet, unwavering beat of his own heart. He had been so focused on the outward expression of rhythm that he had become deaf to the source of all rhythm, the quiet, constant song of his own existence. His hands, once so busy shaping and stretching, now rested gently over his heart, not to make sound, but to feel it, to listen to it. He realized that the silence he had feared, the void he had tried to fill, was not an enemy. It was, in fact, the spaciousness within which this inner drum could finally be heard. It was the canvas upon which his own unique rhythm could now resonate. The destruction of his external drums had not robbed him of rhythm. It had led him to the only drum that truly mattered. Just as Kamala learned that true giving amplifies, Tejo discovered that true listening reveals. The greatest sound is not always the loudest, the most intricate, or the most celebrated. The most profound rhythm is often the one that needs no external instrument, no grand performance, no striving. It is simply the quiet, steady beat of life itself, pulsing within each of us, waiting for us to turn inward, to listen, to feel its gentle, unwavering presence. Tejo sat there for a long time, simply listening to his heart. The fear of the void, the need to fill it, slowly began to dissolve. A new kind of peace, a deeper, more resonant quiet, settled over him. He knew now that he would make new drums, perhaps, but his relationship with sound and with silence would be forever changed. He would always carry the memory of that inner rhythm, the fundamental beat that reminded him of his own essence, his own being. We too are invited to turn inward, to quiet the external noise, to step away from the constant striving to create and to fill. Perhaps, like Tejo, we will discover that the profound rhythm we seek is not out there, waiting to be made, but already here, beating softly, steadily, patiently within us. It is the quiet drum of our own existence, the most essential rhythm of our lives, always present, always playing, if only we take the time to listen. We turn now, our journey leading us to the glistening coastal flats, where the earth meets the endless sea and the air hums with a different kind of quiet. Here the sun bakes the shallow waters, coaxing forth a precious bounty. This is the domain of Devi, the salt harvester. Devi was a woman of serene presence, her skin weathered by the tireless sun and the salty sea air, her face etched with the quiet wisdom of years spent observing the patient rhythms of nature. Her silver hair, often pulled back in a neat bun and adorned with a simple wooden pin, caught the light like spun moonlight. She moved with a gentle grace. Her loose-fitting robes, in shades of white and pale blue, billowing softly in the coastal breeze, like the slow, quiet breathing of the ocean itself.
Devi's voice, when she spoke, was soft and resonant, much like the rhythmic lapping of waves against the shore. Every day, from dawn until dusk, Devi worked with meticulous care, gathering the crystalline salt from the vast, shimmering pans where seawater had evaporated under the sun's gentle heat. She understood the intricate process, the delicate balance of sun and wind that concentrated the ocean's essence into sparkling white mounds. She handled pure, concentrated flavor all day, her hands perpetually dusted with the pristine crystals, her senses steeped in its sharp, clean scent. She provided this essential seasoning for the entire village, a fundamental component of every meal, every preservation. Yet, despite her intimate connection to this source of flavor, a quiet dilemma had settled deep within Devi's own heart. A strange, pervasive blandness had crept into her life. Everything she ate, everything she tasted, felt muted, dull, uninspired. The vibrant flavors of the freshest fruits, the rich spices of a hearty stew, the simple sweetness of a fresh spring onion, all registered as flat, indistinct, without their true essence. It was as if her own inner wellspring of taste had run dry, leaving her world colorless and insipid, a life without its own unique savor. She tried, with a quiet desperation, to restore the lost sensation. She would eat more salt, hoping to shock her palate back to life, but it only made her mouth feel dry and rough, the flavor still absent. She would try less salt, thinking perhaps she had grown accustomed to its intensity, but this only deepened the blandness, leaving meals utterly tasteless. She experimented with different herbs and spices, grinding them finely, adding them sparingly, then generously to her food. She sought out rare and exotic ingredients from traveling merchants, hoping a novel flavor might break through the dullness that had enveloped her. But nothing worked. The rich fragrance of cumin, the sharp bite of ginger, the earthy warmth of turmeric, they all passed her by, leaving no impression, no lingering memory of taste. Her life, so full of the creation of flavor for others, remained stubbornly, profoundly tasteless for herself. She would sit by the edge of the salt pans, watching the sun catch the myriad facets of the crystals, admiring their perfect form, their pure essence.
She understood their value, their power to transform, to enhance, to preserve. She knew intellectually the profound importance of what she harvested, but the direct personal experience of that power, that flavor, had somehow eluded her. A quiet sadness would often settle over her as she worked, a gentle sigh escaping her lips, lost in the vastness of the flats. We are often like Devi, are we not? So focused on the grand, the concentrated, the intense experience. We seek the peak moments, the overwhelming sensations, believing that only in such powerful encounters can true meaning or true flavor be found. We strive, we accumulate, we push for more, for stronger, for purer. But sometimes, in our pursuit of the concentrated essence, we forget the delicate beauty that lies in the simple, the subtle, the unadorned. Let us take a moment now, a gentle breath, a soft pause, to simply savor the simple. Feel the air moving in and out of your body, a quiet, simple act of life. Notice the gentle weight of your body resting where it is. Allow your attention to settle on one simple sensation. The feel of the fabric against your skin, the quiet hum of the world around you, the gentle rhythm of your own breath, not seeking intensity, not striving for a peak experience, but simply resting in the quiet, delicate presence of what is, exactly as it is. Savor this simple moment, this quiet breath. Then, one afternoon, the sky, which had been a clear, brilliant blue for weeks, began to shift. Soft gray clouds drifted in from the sea, not with the ominous weight of a storm, but with a gentle, whispering promise. A soft rain began to fall. It was not a harsh, driving downpour, but a delicate, almost ethereal shower, a curtain of fine droplets descending upon the coastal flats. Devi stood watching from her small shelter, her work interrupted. She saw the countless droplets kiss the shimmering surface of the salt pans. She watched as the soft rain began its quiet work. Her carefully piled mounds of crystalline salt, which she had spent hours gathering and shaping, began to transform. The pristine white peaks softened, their sharp edges blurring. Slowly, peacefully, the individual crystals began to dissolve, melting back into the pale blue water from which they had been born. The concentrated essence of the ocean, painstakingly gathered and stored, was now gently returning to its original, diluted form. Devi watched without alarm, without a sense of loss. There was something profoundly beautiful in this undoing, this gentle reabsorption. The rain fell, the salt dissolved, and the water in the pans became a little less salty, a little more diluted, a little closer to the pure, simple essence of the rain itself. A quiet curiosity stirred within her. She stepped out into the gentle shower, holding out her palm. The cool, soft rain collected in her cupped hand. She brought her hand to her lips, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she tasted something truly new. The rain was not bland. It was sweet. It was refreshing. It was clear and pure, carrying a delicate, subtle flavor that resonated deep within her. It was not the intense, sharp punch of concentrated salt, but a soft, profound sweetness, a taste of natural balance and simplicity. In that moment of quiet revelation, standing under the falling rain, Devi understood. She had been so focused, so utterly consumed by the pursuit of concentrated flavor, by the gathering of pure, intense essence, that she had forgotten the delicate beauty of dilution.
She had overlooked the quiet sweetness found not in accumulation, but in simplicity. She had been searching for taste in the grand, the powerful, the intense, when the most profound flavor, the most refreshing sweetness, was present in the natural balance, in the gentle, unforced interaction of water and air. The flavor she sought for her own life was not to be found in more salt, or less salt, or different herbs. It was to be found in the quiet acceptance of balance, in the recognition that true beauty, true taste, is often most vibrant in its natural, diluted form, in the gentle flow of life itself. The rain, in its simple act of returning the salt to the water, had shown her that the world held its own profound sweetness, not just in the highly concentrated, but in the subtle, the balanced, the unadorned. Her life, she realized, did not need to be a towering pile of concentrated experience to be flavorful. It could be like the rain-kissed water in the salt pans, a delicate blend, a gentle dilution, holding its own unique, refreshing sweetness. She saw that the pursuit of intense flavor had blinded her to the quiet, natural sweetness that had always been present, waiting for her to simply open her senses, to taste the world as it was, in its simple, balanced perfection. Devi returned to her shelter, the rain still falling softly. Her heart felt lighter, her mind clearer. The blandness had not vanished entirely, perhaps, but a new understanding had blossomed, a quiet wisdom that promised a different kind of savoring. She knew now that she would continue to harvest the concentrated salt for the village, for it had its purpose. But for herself, she would also seek out the quiet sweetness of dilution, the refreshing taste of simplicity, the profound flavor of natural balance. She would learn to taste the rain. Just as Tejo discovered the inner drum, Devi found the inner sweetness. Both had been seeking outside themselves for what was already present, already flowing, already beating within and around them. They had been so focused on creating and concentrating that they had overlooked the subtle whisper, the delicate taste, the quiet rhythm of life's simple truths. We too are invited to remember this quiet wisdom. In our own lives, when we feel that flavor has faded, that purpose is lost, or that joy is absent, perhaps we are looking in the wrong place. Perhaps we are trying too hard to concentrate, to accumulate, to intensify. Perhaps the true sweetness, the profound flavor, the fundamental rhythm is found not in the grand, the overwhelming, or the perfectly formed, but in the delicate balance, the gentle dilution, the quiet flow of simply being, to taste the rain, to hear the quiet drum, to embrace the simple, natural balance that has always been present, waiting for us to notice. Our journey now leads us away from the shimmering salt flats, inland towards the winding pathways of the great river, where the fishing boats return with their morning catch, and the air is thick with the scent of fresh water and damp earth. Here, under the shade of ancient banyan trees, we find Gopal. Gopal, the fisherman's net mender. Gopal was a kindly man, his face etched with the lines of a life lived close to the water, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he offered a rare, gentle smile. His hands, though strong and adept, were rough and calloused from years of working with twine and needle, constantly repairing the intricate webs that fed the village. He knew every knot, every weave, every delicate tension required to craft a net that would hold its bounty. Day after day, he sat by the river's edge, surrounded by piles of discarded, torn, or tangled nets, patiently restoring them to wholeness. He was a master of his craft, a quiet guardian of the village's sustenance, ensuring that the fishermen could always return with full baskets. Yet, despite the abundance his work brought to others, Gopal carried an inner sadness, a quiet ache that settled deep within his chest. He felt his own life was full of holes, not just the physical holes in the nets he mended, but metaphorical holes, empty spaces where meaning and joy seemed to slip through his grasp. He felt unable to hold on to anything truly meaningful for himself. The moments of happiness, the quiet satisfaction, the warmth of connection, all seemed to pass through him, leaving him feeling porous, unfinished, incomplete. He watched the fishermen's families laugh as they sorted the day's catch, the children's excited cries echoing across the water. He saw the full baskets, the gleaming fish, the bounty that his mended nets had allowed. And he would look at his own life and see only the gaps, the spaces where things were missing, the perceived imperfections. He saw his years, his efforts, his quiet existence, and believed it was all just a collection of voids, a net that, for all its mending, could never truly hold. So Gopal worked with a silent intensity, driven by a deep-seated belief that if only he could make the nets perfect, truly perfect, perhaps then his own life would somehow become whole. He would meticulously weave tighter, using finer, stronger thread, trying to eliminate every possible gap, every potential point of weakness. He spent long hours experimenting with new patterns, new materials, always striving for a net so flawlessly constructed that nothing, not even the smallest minnow, could ever slip through. He believed that a net without holes was the ultimate achievement, the symbol of true security and abundance. And perhaps, if he could achieve this impossible perfection in his craft, then his own heart, his own life, might finally be able to hold on to happiness. He would spend days on a single net, his brow furrowed in concentration, his rough fingers moving with a practiced, almost desperate grace. Each knot was tied with an intention to seal, to secure, to prevent escape. Each thread was pulled taut with the hope that it would make his own life more substantial, less porous. He imagined a life that was solid, unbroken, a tightly woven fabric where nothing could be lost, nothing could pass through. He equated holes with loss, with failure, with the inability to contain, and he wanted, more than anything, to contain his own happiness, to hold it firm and fast. He believed that his sadness, his feeling of emptiness, stemmed from these holes in his existence. He saw them as flaws, as evidence of his own inadequacy, his inability to grasp and keep the good things in life. He had tried to mend these metaphorical holes in his heart with more work, more effort, more striving, just as he mended the physical holes in the nets. But the quiet ache remained. The sense of incompleteness persisted. The feeling that his life, for all his diligent mending, was still somehow full of empty spaces. We, too, often carry a similar burden. We look at our lives and see the gaps, the imperfections, the places where we feel we fall short. We try to mend them, to fill them, to make ourselves whole and complete by striving, by achieving, by accumulating. We believe that if we just work harder, if we just try more, if we can just eliminate all the perceived holes in our being,
then we will finally find peace, finally find happiness. We equate wholeness with an unbroken surface, with an absence of vulnerability, with a state of being where nothing can ever be lost or slip away. Let us rest now just for a moment, a gentle breath, a soft pause, to simply acknowledge our own perceived imperfections. Feel the quiet hum of your own being. Notice any places within you that feel incomplete, any holes you have been trying to mend. And for this quiet moment, simply allow them to be, not to fix, not to judge, but simply to acknowledge with a soft, gentle acceptance. Allow your breath to deepen, to flow gently in and out, a constant, quiet rhythm. Rest in this moment, exactly as it is. One warm afternoon, Gopal sat by the river, his legs stretched out on the damp earth. He was working on an old net, one that had been badly torn in a recent storm. It was a challenging repair, requiring all his skill and patience. He had submerged a portion of the net in the clear, shallow water at the river's edge, using the gentle current to help him untangle the snags and align the broken threads. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his nimble fingers weaving the new twine through the old. As he worked, lost in the rhythm of his mending, a small child wandered by. The child, no older than 5, with bright, curious eyes and bare feet sinking slightly into the wet sand, paused beside Gopal. He watched the old man's hands for a moment, then pointed a curious finger at the net Gopal held, now suspended, shimmering in the clear, shallow water. "Old man," the child asked, his voice a sweet, clear bell, cutting through Gopal's focused thoughts. "Why do the fish play in the holes?" Gopal paused, his needle still. He looked at the child, then at the net. He had always seen the holes as imperfections, as failures, as places where the catch could escape, where the purpose of the net was compromised. He had never considered them as anything but problems to be fixed, gaps to be closed. "They are not trying to escape, old man," the child continued, his small voice full of a simple, undeniable certainty. "They are dancing. They are dancing through the open spaces." Gopal looked closer. His eyes, so accustomed to seeing only what was broken, what needed mending, slowly began to adjust. Indeed, tiny minnows, their scales glinting like scattered jewels in the sunlight, darted through the mesh. They were not struggling against the threads, not pushing to break free. They were weaving, twisting, playing. They flowed effortlessly through the openings, in and out, a joyful, unceasing dance. The holes, far from being barriers or points of escape, were pathways. They were spaces for movement, for connection, for play. The old man was quiet for a long moment, the child's simple words echoing in the vast, silent chamber of his own perception. "Dancing," he murmured, the word tasting new on his tongue, like fresh water after a long thirst. It was a word he had never associated with the nets or with the holes. Perhaps, we will see. But even as he spoke the words, a profound shift had begun within him. He saw the holes not as absences, but as presences, not as failures, but as essential components. The very structure of the net, he realized, was defined not just by the threads, but by the spaces between them. Without the holes, it would not be a net at all. It would be a solid sheet, unable to interact with the water, unable to capture, unable to allow flow. The holes were not flaws. They were essential. They were what allowed the river to move through, what allowed the fish to enter, what allowed life to dance and flow.
In that quiet moment, watching the minnows play, Gopal understood. The holes in the net were not imperfections to be eliminated, but pathways that let the river flow, allowing life to dance through, not just to be captured. The openings were essential for connection and joy. His entire life, he had been striving to close the holes, to create a solid, impenetrable surface, believing that only then could he hold on to meaning. But what if the holes in his own life, the empty spaces, the perceived lacks, were not failures to be mended, but essential pathways for life itself to flow through him? What if they were the very spaces that allowed for movement, for connection, for joy, for the dance of existence? His sadness did not vanish in an instant, for the habits of a lifetime run deep. But a seed of quiet wisdom had been planted. He began to see his own life differently. The spaces he had perceived as empty were not voids to be filled, but openings through which new experiences could flow. The moments he had felt unable to hold on to were perhaps not meant to be grasped, but to be allowed to pass through like the river through the net, enriching everything in their wake. He realized that true abundance was not about capturing and holding everything tightly, but about allowing the flow, about embracing the permeable nature of existence. The holes in the net allowed the water to pass, making the net lighter, more effective, more a part of the river itself. And perhaps the holes in his own life allowed for a lightness of being, a greater connection to the natural flow of things, a capacity for joy that was not about accumulation, but about open-hearted participation. Gopal continued to mend nets for the village, his hands still skilled, his movements still patient. But now, when he looked at the intricate mesh, his gaze lingered on the open spaces, the pathways. He saw them not as problems, but as invitations. He saw the beauty in the balance between thread and void, between what held and what allowed to pass. And as he mended, a quiet, gentle joy began to bloom within him, a subtle flavor of sweetness that had been hidden in plain sight, in the very holes he had spent a lifetime trying to eliminate. He learned that the richness of life was not found in a net without holes, but in a net that understood the dance of the river, that allowed for flow, that saw the openings as essential for connection and for play. The holes, he realized, were not what made life incomplete. They were what made it alive. They were what made it beautiful. They were the very architecture of joy. Just as Tejo discovered the inner drum and Devi found the inner sweetness, Gopal found the inner joy in the flow. All three had been seeking a fixed, solid state, a perfect sound, a concentrated flavor, a net without holes, only to discover that the profound truths resided in the opposite, in the quiet rhythm of internal being, in the delicate balance of dilution, in the essential, joyful flow that passes through the open spaces. They had been so focused on mending and perfecting that they had overlooked the subtle whisper, the delicate taste, the quiet rhythm, the joyful dance of life's simple truths that were always present, waiting for them to notice. We, too, are invited to remember this quiet wisdom in our own lives when we feel that something is missing, that we are incomplete, or that our efforts are futile. Perhaps we are looking in the wrong place. Perhaps we are trying too hard to close the holes, to mend the perceived imperfections. to create a solid, unbroken surface. Perhaps the true joy, the profound connection, the fundamental flow is found not in the grand, the overwhelming, or the perfectly formed, but in the delicate balance of presence and absence, in the gentle flow of simply being, in the recognition that the holes in our lives are not failures, but pathways for connection, for play, for the vibrant dance of existence. To see the holes as pathways, to embrace the flow, to taste the rain, to hear the quiet drum, to embrace the simple natural balance that has always been present, waiting for us to notice. We turn our attention now to Leela, the dung plasterer, a woman of strong frame and resilient spirit, whose days were spent in the quiet, rhythmic labor of hands. Her gaze was direct, her movements purposeful, as she mixed earth and dung, transforming humble components into something more. Her hands, rough and strong, were always busy, always working, always touching the very elements that defined her craft. Her simple, dark clothing often bore the marks of her labor, smudged with mud and plaster, a quiet testament to her dedication. Leela worked with a precision born of long experience. She knew the exact ratio of rich river mud to dried cow dung, the perfect amount of water to achieve a smooth, pliable paste. She knew how to work the mixture with her bare feet in a large, shallow pit, feeling the textures, the cool earth, the fibrous dung, until it became a uniform, yielding mass. Then, with broad, sweeping strokes of her hand, she would apply it to the walls of the villagers' homes. Her work was essential. It was the ancient way, passed down through generations. The dung plaster, once dried, created walls that were smooth and clean to the touch. It kept insects at bay, its subtle scent a natural deterrent. It added a layer of insulation, keeping homes cool in the heat of the day and warm through the chill of the night. It transformed crumbling, fragile structures into sturdy, beautiful sanctuaries. It was a purifying act, a cleansing, a blessing bestowed upon the very foundations of village life. And yet, despite the inherent purity and purpose of her craft, Leela carried a deep, persistent sense of contamination within herself, a quiet shame, a feeling that no amount of washing could truly remove the grime, the essence of the filth she handled daily. Her firm, clear voice might speak of the practicalities of her work, but her inner world was shadowed by this subtle, pervasive feeling of being stained, permanently marked by the very material she used. She saw the dung not as a transformative element, but as waste, as something impure. And by handling it, by working it into the very fabric of others' homes, she felt as though that impurity transferred to her. It clung to her skin, seeped into her clothing, settled deep within her bones. She would wash her hands diligently, scrubbing them with river sand and strong lye soap until they were raw and red. She would bathe in the cold river water at the end of each day, letting the current rush over her, trying to wash away the feeling of defilement. But the feeling remained, a tenacious shadow that followed her, a subtle, heavy weight on her heart. She saw the transformation she wrought on the walls, the beauty and strength she created for others, but she could not see it for herself. She believed she was merely a conduit for something unpleasant, a vessel through which waste was moved, not a bringer of blessings. She saw herself as handling filth, not bestowing warmth and shelter. And this internal struggle, this quiet, unacknowledged burden, made her movements sometimes heavy, her spirit sometimes weary, despite her outward strength and resilience. We too sometimes carry such burdens. We perform acts of service. We dedicate ourselves to tasks, but we judge the nature of our labor, or the materials we work with, or even the nature of our own hands. We allow our minds to label things as pure or impure, as worthy or unworthy, and in doing so, we unwittingly cast a shadow over our own hearts. We create a sense of contamination where none truly exists, a feeling of being stained by life's necessary processes. Let us pause now and breathe. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Let your breath be soft and steady. And as you breathe, consider those judgments we sometimes hold, those labels we attach to ourselves and to the world around us. Can we, for a moment, release them? Can we allow the mind to simply observe without categorizing, without judging? Can we let go of the need to define everything and simply be present with what is, just as we have learned to embrace the flow, to taste the rain, to hear the quiet drum? Can we now release the subtle judgments that cloud our perception? Leela continued her work, day after day, year after year, with the same dedication, the same quiet, internal struggle. Until one day she was called to a small, crumbling home at the edge of the village. It belonged to an old widow whose husband had passed many seasons ago, leaving her with little but the fragile walls that now threatened to collapse around her. The mud bricks were crumbling, the plaster flaking away like old skin, revealing the raw, exposed earth beneath. It was a home that spoke of vulnerability, of a life barely holding on. Leela approached the wall, her usual sense of resignation settling over her. This was just another job, another layer of filth to be applied, another instance of her hands working with what she perceived as unclean. She began her meticulous process. She cleaned the surface, brushed away the loose earth, and prepared her mixture. The familiar scent rose around her as she worked, the cool, pliable mud and dung yielding to her strong hands. She applied the first layer, carefully pressing it into the cracks and crevices, building up the surface. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each stroke an act of concentration. She worked silently, mindful of the widow's quiet presence inside the small dwelling, the soft sounds of her breathing, the rustle of her simple sari. Leela felt a pang of empathy for the old woman, living in such fragile circumstances in a home that offered so little protection. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Leela stepped back. She wiped her brow with the back of her wrist, leaving a faint streak of pale plaster, and surveyed her work. The first section of the wall was complete. It was still damp, a rich, dark brown, but already the transformation was evident. The crumbling surface had been smoothed. The gaping cracks were gone. What was once a patchwork of decay now presented a uniform, resilient face to the world. She looked at the wall, and then she looked at the home, and then she looked at the widow, who had emerged from the doorway, her frail form silhouetted against the warm light within. The old woman's eyes, though weary with age, held a glimmer of something Leela had rarely seen directed at her work: profound relief. And then a small, soft smile. "Thank you, Leela," the widow whispered, her voice thin but clear. "It feels strong again, warm. It feels like a home." Leela stood still, the words washing over her like a gentle rain. Strong, warm, a home. She looked at her hands, still slightly caked with the drying plaster, and then back at the wall. In that moment, something shifted within her. It was not a grand revelation, not a sudden flash of blinding light. It was a quiet unfolding, a gentle blossoming of understanding in the fertile ground of her own heart. She saw how her humble mixture, the very elements she had called filth, had transformed the fragile structure into something strong and beautiful. It was providing warmth and shelter. It was offering protection. It was not merely covering, but creating. It was not just mending, but renewing. What she had called filth was not filth at all. It was earth and life, blended and shaped by her hands. It was a blessing, a sacred act of transforming waste into protection and beauty. Through her hands, humble materials became a sanctuary. Her own hands, which she had felt were perpetually stained, were not spreading contamination. They were bestowing blessings. They were creating warmth, providing shelter, offering a renewed sense of safety and dignity to another human being. The feeling of shame, the subtle burden of perceived impurity, began to lift, like mist dissolving in the morning sun. It did not vanish entirely, for the habits of a lifetime are woven deep into the fabric of our being. But a profound shift had occurred. She saw her work not as a source of defilement, but as a source of healing, of renewal, of sacred service. The mixture on her hands was not a mark of contamination, but a badge of honor, a symbol of the life-giving transformations she facilitated. She realized that the true nature of her work was not in the individual components, but in the alchemy of their combination, in the intention of her labor, in the gift of warmth and shelter she offered to the world. The dung, once seen as mere waste, was now recognized as a vital ingredient, a carrier of warmth, a binder of earth, a quiet force of transformation. Leela continued to plaster walls for the village. Her hands still worked with the same diligence, the same precision. But now, when she looked at the mixture, she saw not filth, but potential. When she felt the cool, yielding paste beneath her fingers, she felt not contamination, but connection to the earth, to life, to the very fabric of existence. And when she stepped back to admire her finished work, a quiet, deep satisfaction bloomed within her, a sense of purpose that was not burdened by judgment, but uplifted by gratitude. She learned that she was not spreading contamination, but bestowing blessings, that through her hands, humble materials became a sanctuary. The very waste she had shunned was, in fact, the seed of warmth and shelter, a testament to life's endless capacity for renewal. She had been so focused on the perceived impurity of the material that she had overlooked the profound, sacred transformation it underwent and the blessing it offered. Just as Bhima learned that his shadow was a faithful companion, and Mira found sweetness in giving, and Sonu discovered purpose in the unformed, and Kamala saw fire grow by sharing, and Tejo heard the drum within, and Devi tasted sweetness in dilution, and Gopal found joy in the wholes, Leela now understood. The deepest truths are often found in the places we least expect them, in the humble materials, in the perceived imperfections, in the very things we might be tempted to call filth. All of these quiet awakenings point to a shared understanding that true contentment is not about avoiding what we deem unpleasant or about striving for an idealized purity, but about seeing clearly what is already present. It is about recognizing the inherent worth and transformative power in all things, in all experiences, in all the cycles of life and decay and renewal. It is about letting go of our judgments and opening our hearts to the quiet, profound blessings that are constantly being offered, waiting for us to notice, waiting for us to receive. We are invited now to carry this gentle wisdom with us, to look at the perceived waste in our own lives, the moments of discomfort, the things we might wish to hide or discard, and to ask ourselves with a soft and open heart, is there a blessing hidden here? Is there a sanctuary waiting to be revealed? Is there a quiet transformation at play, turning what I once called filth into warmth, into beauty, into a renewed sense of purpose and peace? May we, like Leela, find the sacred in the seemingly mundane and the blessing in every humble act. We journey now deeper into the forest, where the air is cool and fragrant with pine, and the soft earth yields to our steps. Here, among the ancient trees, we find young Nanda. He is the bark stripper, lean and agile, with eyes as keen as a hawk's. His movements are quick, yet always gentle, as he tends to his craft. Nanda's work is to carefully strip bark from certain trees, bark that will be softened and twisted into strong ropes for the village. It is a delicate balance, this work, a dance between taking and preserving. He knows the trees intimately, their rhythms, their seasons. He knows which ones can spare their outer skin and when. He approaches each tree with reverence, offering a quiet prayer before his knife even touches the rough surface. He speaks to them softly, asking for their permission, thanking them for their gift. His tools are simple: a smooth, curved knife, a small wooden mallet, and his own strong, knowing hands. He works with a quiet precision, making only the shallowest cuts, lifting the bark away in long, clean strips, never girdling the trunk, never taking too much. He leaves enough for the tree to heal, to breathe, to continue its life, and he always returns to cover the exposed wood with a special mud paste mixed with herbs to protect it from insects and disease. He truly cares for the trees. He sees them not just as resources, but as living, breathing beings, his silent, green companions in the forest. Yet, despite his care, despite his reverence, Nanda carries a quiet fear, a subtle unease that grows with each strip of bark he peels away. He feels that in stripping the trees of their outer layer, he is slowly, subtly stripping away his own protection. He feels increasingly sensitive, exposed to the world, as if his own skin were growing thinner, more permeable. The rustle of a leaf, the sudden call of a bird, the cool touch of the wind. All these things seem to affect him more deeply than before. He feels less guarded, more vulnerable, as if the very act of his craft is eroding the sturdy shield he once felt around his own heart. He tries to fortify himself. He wears thicker clothes, though they chafe against his skin. He builds his small hut with a stronger roof, though the sounds of the night still seem to penetrate its walls. He retreats further into the quiet solitude of the forest, hoping to avoid the sharper edges of the human world. But still, the feeling persists. He is becoming too sensitive, too raw, too open. What if, he wonders, he strips away so much that there is nothing left to protect him? What if he becomes utterly defenseless, like the vulnerable wood beneath the bark? He watches the trees heal, sees the new skin slowly forming over the exposed wood. It is a slow process,
a patient regeneration. But for himself, he feels no such regrowth, only a deepening sense of exposure. He worries that this path he walks, this gentle art of stripping away, is leading him not to strength, but to fragility. He fears that his kindness, his empathy, his willingness to be gentle in a world that often feels harsh, is making him weak. Let us pause now in this quiet forest with Nanda. Let us feel the cool earth beneath us, the gentle breeze on our skin. And as we breathe, let us feel the strength of our own bodies. Feel the firm ground supporting you. Feel the steady beat of your own heart, a quiet drum within. Feel the silent power of your breath, filling and emptying, a constant rhythm of life. Rest now. Let your awareness settle into the solidness of your own being, the resilient strength that resides within, a strength that has carried you through every moment, every challenge, every tender unfolding. Simply rest in this feeling of inner steadiness. One season, a powerful storm descended upon the forest. It was unlike any Nanda had witnessed in his young life. The wind howled through the branches, a mournful, furious cry. Rain lashed down in thick, stinging sheets, turning the forest floor into a churning river of mud and leaves. Trees swayed and groaned, some snapping with a terrifying crack that echoed through the deluge. Nanda, caught far from his hut, ran for shelter, his heart pounding with the ferocity of the storm. He stumbled through the driving rain, seeking the embrace of a particularly massive tree he knew, one that offered a wide protective canopy. It was an old oak, wise and gnarled, a tree he had worked on many years ago when he was just beginning his apprenticeship. He had stripped a section of its bark then, a carefully chosen strip from its southern side near the base. He remembered his master's stern instructions, his own trembling hands, the careful prayers he had offered to the giant. He finally reached the great tree, panting, soaked to the bone. He pressed himself against its ancient trunk, seeking shelter from the wind and rain. Its massive form offered a reassuring solidity amidst the chaos. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the storm wash over him, letting the tree's quiet strength seep into his own weary bones. As the worst of the storm slowly began to subside, the wind softening to a mournful sigh, the rain lessening to a steady rhythmic drumming, Nanda opened his eyes. His gaze fell upon the very spot where he had stripped the bark years ago. He had always checked on his trees, always observed their healing. But in the dim, rain-washed light, something caught his attention. He reached out a hand, his fingers tracing the contour of the bark. It was not merely healed, it was transformed. The new bark that had grown back was visibly thicker, more rugged, more deeply textured than the original skin of the tree. It felt incredibly strong beneath his touch, a resilient, almost impenetrable shield. It was not just a patch, it was an enhancement. The tree had not simply recovered, it had regenerated with a new, deeper strength. In this quiet observation, a profound realization bloomed within Nanda. He leaned his head against the tree, feeling the cool, rough surface against his cheek, and understood. What he had seen as a wounding for the tree, a stripping away of its protection, had actually triggered a deeper, more robust growth. The tree, in its process of recovery and regeneration, had become more itself, not less. It had responded to the challenge by building a stronger,
more authentic skin, one better equipped to face the future storms. The vulnerability he had perceived, the exposed wood, had not been a weakness, but an opportunity. It was the catalyst for a more profound integration, a more resilient expression of its own inherent nature. The tree had not diminished, it had deepened. It had not lost its protection. It had grown a new, more powerful one from within. And as he looked at the tree, Nanda looked inward. He thought of his own feeling of vulnerability, his own perceived stripping away. He had feared that his sensitivity, his openness, his gentleness was leaving him exposed and weak. But perhaps he now understood what felt like a wound, what felt like an absence of protection, was actually the very process through which he could grow stronger, more truly himself. Perhaps the moments when he felt most raw, most exposed, were not signs of his diminishing, but signals of his becoming. Perhaps these feelings were not weaknesses to be hidden, but pathways to a more authentic, more resilient version of himself. He began to see that true strength was not about an impenetrable outer shell, but about the capacity for regeneration, for growth from within, for responding to the world, not by hardening, but by deepening. The tree did not mourn its lost bark. It grew a new one, better suited for its journey through time. And Nanda realized he too could allow his own perceived wounds to become catalysts for stronger, more authentic growth. He could embrace his sensitivity, not as a burden, but as a heightened awareness, a deeper connection to the world around him. His gentleness was not a weakness, but a profound strength, a capacity for empathy and understanding that would allow him to grow more fully into his own true nature. He learned that what seems like wounding can actually trigger stronger growth. The tree had become more itself, not less, through its process of recovery and regeneration, and so too could he. He did not need to be afraid of shedding an old skin, of feeling exposed for a time. For in that vulnerability, in that open space, lay the potential for something new, something thicker, something more truly his own, to grow. Just as Bhima learned that his shadow was a faithful companion, and Meera found sweetness in giving, and Sonu discovered purpose in the unformed, and Kamala saw fire grow by sharing, and Tejo heard the drum within, and Devi tasted sweetness in dilution, and Gopal found joy in the holes, and Leela turned waste into blessing, Nanda now understood. The path to strength is not always paved with an unyielding surface. Sometimes it is found in the very act of shedding, of yielding, of allowing oneself to be open to the process of healing and growth. All of these quiet awakenings point to a shared understanding that true contentment is not found in avoiding change or in clinging to what was, but in embracing the dynamic, regenerative nature of life itself. It is about trusting the process, even when that process feels like a stripping away, even when it feels like a wound. For within every perceived loss, within every moment of vulnerability, lies the seed of new life, of deeper strength, of a more authentic unfolding. We are invited now to carry this gentle wisdom with us, to look at the moments in our own lives when we have felt exposed, when we have felt our protection stripped away, when we have perceived ourselves as wounded, and to ask ourselves with a soft and open heart, is there a deeper strength waiting to emerge from this? Is there a new, more resilient skin ready to grow? Is there a quiet transformation at play, turning what I once called a weakness into a source of profound, authentic growth and a truer expression of who I truly are? May we, like Nanda and the ancient tree, find courage in our vulnerability and grow stronger, more truly ourselves through the cycles of shedding and renewal. We journey now to a different landscape, one touched by the quiet finality of life's cycles, yet holding the secret of its endless renewal. We carry with us the wisdom of the ancient tree and Nanda's newfound understanding that even a perceived wound can be the catalyst for deeper, stronger growth. We carry the quiet, knowing that shedding an old skin is not always a loss, but often an invitation for something new, something more authentic to emerge. Now, our path leads us to Venu, the ash collector. His presence is always a quiet one, a man whose movements are slow and deliberate, as if each step is an act of reverence, a hushed prayer offered to the earth. His face, weathered by the seasons, often carries a gentle, reflective sadness, a quiet echo of the solemn duties he performs. His hair, streaked with the soft gray of twilight, hints at the many cycles of life and death he has witnessed. He wears robes of dark, muted colors, always clean, always simple, like the deep soil itself, always ready to receive. Venu's sacred duty is to gather the ashes after the cremations have concluded, after the flames have consumed all that was perishable, leaving behind only the fine, pale powder. These ashes, so light, so ethereal, are not merely the residue of what is past. They are the essence of a life, returned to its simplest form, awaiting the final journey to the river. For generations, his family has performed this task, ensuring that the last vestiges of a loved one's physical form are respectfully returned to the flowing waters to merge with the endless current of existence. But for Venu, this solemn duty carried a heavy burden. He felt a pervasive gray sorrow clinging to him, like the fine dust that permeated the air around the cremation grounds. It was as if death's residue, the weight of every ending, had settled upon his own heart, a sadness no amount of washing could remove. He would wash his hands, his face, his robes again and again in the cool, clear river, trying to rinse away the somber weight, to cleanse his spirit of the quiet grief that seemed to cling to him. But the feeling remained. He felt himself to be a vessel for endings, a keeper of finality, and this made his own life feel tinged with a muted, subtle sorrow. He moved through his days with this quiet weight, this sense of carrying the past, of being intimately connected to the moments of farewell. He would walk to the cremation grounds, often at dawn, when the first light was just touching the tops of the tallest trees, and the air was still cool and damp. He would approach the pyre, now a cooled mound of white and gray ash, with a deep respect, almost a tenderness. His hands, strong yet gentle, would carefully scoop the ashes into a simple woven basket, the fine powder shifting and whispering as he gathered it. He paid careful attention to every particle, ensuring that nothing was left behind, that the process was complete, reverent. He saw the ashes as a concentrated symbol of what was no more. A life had burned bright, and now only this remained. And in that remaining, in that quiet dust, he saw only the end, the cessation, the absence. His heart, heavy with this perception,
would sink further with each scoop, each breath. We often find ourselves too carrying the weight of endings. We cling to what was, to what we have lost, to what is past. We see the finality, the closure, and sometimes a quiet sorrow settles upon us, much like the fine ash clinging to Venu's robes. We try to wash it away, to forget, to move on, but the residue remains. We perceive it as a burden, a mark of what is gone. Allow yourself now a deep, soft breath. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest, and with each exhale, invite a quiet release. Release any lingering judgments, any heavy burdens you might be carrying, any sorrow that clings to what has passed. Simply allow yourself to breathe and to gently let go of what no longer serves you. One day, Venu followed his usual path, carrying his basket of ashes towards the river. The morning was clear and bright, the sun already warming the air, stirring the forest to life with the distant calls of birds. He walked slowly, his mind perhaps a little more distant than usual, his thoughts drifting like the wisps of morning mist. Perhaps he was contemplating the life that had passed, or simply lost in the quiet rhythm of his steps. He crossed a small, fallow field, an expanse of dry, cracked earth, usually left barren, waiting for the next planting season. As he walked, a small, sudden gust of wind, unexpected in its playful strength, caught his simple robes. He stumbled just slightly, his foot catching on an unseen root. The woven basket held loosely in his hand tilted, and in that moment of quiet distraction, a cloud of fine gray ash lifted from the basket, caught by the breeze, and drifted across the fallow field. It settled gently upon the dry, waiting earth, a soft, silent scattering. Venu stopped, his breath held, his eyes widened, a flicker of dismay crossing his face. He had never made such a mistake. His duty was precise, reverent. The ashes were meant for the river, for the flowing current, not for the dry, unyielding earth. He looked at the field, now dusted with the pale gray powder, and a deeper wave of sorrow washed over him. He felt he had failed, not just in his duty, but in his respect for the departed. The ashes, meant for a sacred journey, now lay scattered, seemingly wasted, upon barren ground. He sighed, a soft, mournful sound, and continued his walk to the river, the remaining ashes now held tightly in his grip. The weight in his heart felt heavier than ever. Days turned into weeks. Venu continued his solemn duties, always careful now, always mindful of his steps. But the image of the scattered ashes in the fallow field remained with him, a quiet mark of his perceived failure. He would sometimes glance at the field as he passed, a pang of regret in his heart. The field remained fallow, seemingly unchanged, a patch of dry, unpromising earth. Then, slowly, softly, the rains came, gentle, persistent, life-giving. The dry earth softened, soaking up the moisture, preparing itself. And as the sun returned, warm and bright, something began to stir in the field. First, a faint green blush, almost imperceptible. Then, tiny shoots pushing through the soil, reaching for the light. Venu noticed it first on one of his morning walks. His gaze, accustomed to observing the subtle shifts of the natural world, caught the vibrant color. He paused, his steps slowing, a quiet curiosity beginning to replace his usual solemnity. He walked to the edge of the field, then slowly, carefully, stepped into it. He knelt, his fingers gently touching the new growth. The plants were not just growing, they were thriving. The leaves were a deep, rich green,
almost shimmering with vitality. The stalks were sturdy, promising. And as he looked closer, he realized something profound. These were the richest crops he had ever seen in this particular field. More vibrant, more abundant, more full of life than any planting before. And the growth was thickest, most lush, in the very spot where the ashes had fallen. A profound understanding, soft and quiet, settled in Venu's heart. It was not a sudden burst of revelation, but a gentle unfurling, like the slow opening of a flower. He looked at the vibrant green shoots, then at his own hands, still dusted with the memory of ash. He had believed he was carrying death's burden, the residue of an ending. He had seen the ashes as the final chapter, the last whisper of what was no more. But now, in this field bursting with life, he saw them differently. He saw that he had not been carrying death, but the concentrated beginning of new life. The ashes were not an end, but pure potential, a rich, elemental nourishment waiting for the right soil, the right conditions to flourish. They were the very essence of transformation, turning what had seemed like a finality into a potent seed of renewal. Endings, he now understood, were not truly endings. They were merely the quiet beginnings of something new, something waiting to emerge, to grow, to nourish the earth. The ash, once a symbol of loss, was now a powerful testament to regeneration, to the endless cycle of life. It was a blessing, not a burden. It was the promise of rebirth, not the sorrow of farewell. He had spent his life observing the closure of cycles, carrying the physical remnants of what had passed. But he had missed the deeper truth. He had been so focused on the ending of one form that he hadn't seen the beginning of another. The ashes, seemingly barren, were actually fertile ground, teeming with the promise of future growth. Venu stood in the field, the morning dew sparkling on the new leaves around him, and felt the pervasive gray sorrow begin to lift from his heart. It was replaced by a quiet sense of wonder, a deep, resonant peace. He was not a keeper of death, but a guardian of life's enduring promise, a participant in the sacred dance of transformation. He was not carrying a burden, but a blessing, a concentrated potential for new life, waiting to nourish the earth, waiting to nourish the future. Just as Pima learned that his shadow was a faithful companion, and Mira found sweetness in giving, and Sonu discovered purpose in the unformed, and Kamala saw fire grow by sharing, and Tejo heard the drum within, and Devi tasted sweetness in dilution, and Gopal found joy in the holes, and Leela turned waste into blessing, and Nanda grew stronger through wounding. Venu now understood. He carried not death's burden, but the concentrated potential of new life. Endings are truly new beginnings. We too often perceive endings as absolute, the end of a season, the end of a relationship, the end of a phase of life. We see the finality, the quiet closure, and sometimes a gray sorrow can cling to us. We might feel that something has been lost, that a part of us has diminished, that only residue remains. But what if, like Venu, we could look at these moments of ending, these scattered ashes of what was, and see not loss, but potential? What if we could recognize that what seems to be a finality is actually a profound transformation, a release of one form to allow for the flourishing of another? What if the very things we perceive as burdens, as the weight of the past, are actually concentrated seeds of new life
waiting for the right soil, the right moment, to burst forth with vibrant growth. We are invited now to carry this gentle wisdom, to look at the endings in our own lives, not with sadness, but with a quiet sense of anticipation, to trust that within every closure, within every dissolution, within every gentle letting go, lies the fertile ground for new beginnings. For nothing is truly lost, only transformed, and the ashes of what was hold the concentrated potential for all that is yet to be. We have walked alongside these gentle souls, witnessing their quiet awakenings. We have seen how Bhima embraced his shadow, how Mira found sweetness in selfless giving, how Sonu understood the purpose in formlessness, how Kamala learned that fire grows by sharing, how Tejo heard the drum within, how Devi tasted beauty in dilution, how Gopal found joy in the holes, how Leela transformed waste into blessing, how Nanda grew stronger through wounding, and how Venu discovered new life within the ashes of endings. Each of their journeys, unique in its path, points to a singular, profound truth, a truth as ancient as the mountains, as constant as the rivers flow, as inevitable as the changing seasons. It is the truth of Anika, the quiet wisdom of impermanence. We often perceive change as loss. We see the fading of a bloom, the ebbing of a tide, the departure of a loved one, and a quiet sadness may settle in our hearts. We might cling to what was, wishing for things to remain fixed, to be constant, to offer us a solid ground in a world that seems to perpetually shift beneath our feet. But what if change is not merely loss, but the very nature of existence itself? What if impermanence is not something to be feared, but a gentle current in which all life dances and unfolds? Let us revisit, for a moment, the quiet bank where Sonu, the clay digger, labored. He felt his own life was formless, unshaped, lacking definition. He longed for the solid, beautiful forms that the potters created from his clay. But then, the river rose, the monsoon came, and the water, in its ceaseless flow, interacted with his unshaped clay. Some lumps dissolved, returning to the earth from which they came. Some were carried downstream, softening, changing their edges. Others, firm in their quiet resistance, redirected the water's path, shaping the flow of the river itself. Sonu saw then that even unformed clay, in its very state of fluidity, had a purpose. It was not static. It was in constant interaction, constantly transforming, constantly shaping and being shaped by the world around it. The raw clay, in its very impermanence, in its ability to be dissolved and reformed, held a profound, quiet power. It was never truly lost. It simply took on new aspects, new expressions, new ways of meeting the world. Its value lay not in a single, rigid form, but in its potential for endless transformation. And then there was Devi, the salt harvester, whose life had become bland, tasteless, despite her daily work with pure, crystalline flavor. She sought concentration, the essence of taste, believing that in its intensity lay true satisfaction. But a soft rain fell, washing over her carefully piled salt. She watched as the precious crystals, the concentrated essence, dissolved back into the water, becoming one with the vast open sea. In that moment, she tasted the rain itself, finding in its simple purity a quiet, refreshing sweetness. She understood that flavor was not just in the intense, concentrated form. It was also in the delicate balance, in the subtle nuances, in the very act of dilution. The salt was not gone. It had simply returned to its source,
becoming part of a larger, more expansive whole. Its form changed, its intensity softened, but its essence, its quiet mineral presence, remained, now interwoven with the vastness of the water, ready to be absorbed by other forms of life, ready to cycle anew. What she had perceived as a diminishment, a loss of concentration, was in fact a return to a more fundamental, interconnected state. These quiet lessons from the clay and the salt whisper to us about the nature of change. They tell us that nothing is truly static, nothing is truly lost. Everything is in a state of becoming, a gentle unfolding. Imagine, if you will, a small river winding its way through a verdant valley. Its waters sparkle under the sun, reflecting the blue sky, carrying fallen leaves in the quiet murmur of its journey. You follow its path, listening to its constant song, feeling its cool spray on your skin. Then, one day, as the river enters a deep, rocky gorge, its waters seem to vanish. They disappear, seeping into the earth, swallowed by unseen cracks and hidden caverns. The surface is dry. The riverbed, once vibrant, now lies bare, a path of smooth stones and sun-baked mud. A quiet longing might stir within you. Where has the life gone? Has the river truly ended? Has it been lost to the thirsty earth, never to be seen again? You might feel a pang of sorrow, a sense of finality. But if you were to walk further, if you were to follow the dry path, perhaps for many miles, through winding canyons and quiet groves, you would eventually come to a place where the earth itself begins to weep. First, a gentle dampness in the soil. Then, tiny trickles emerging from the rock face, gathering into small pools. And then, slowly, steadily, the river would re-emerge. It would be the same river, yet subtly different. Perhaps clearer now, its waters having been filtered by the earth, enriched by the minerals it encountered in its hidden journey. Perhaps stronger, its flow now fueled by unseen springs, its course more determined, its song deeper and more resonant than before. It would carry the memory of its underground journey, the wisdom of its unseen transformation. It would be a testament to the truth that what seemed to be an ending, a loss, was merely a profound, quiet transformation, a journey beneath the surface, preparing for a renewed emergence. The river did not cease to exist. It simply changed its form, changed its path for a time. It dissolved into the earth, only to re-emerge, clearer and stronger downstream, demonstrating that nothing is truly lost, only transformed. The water, the essence, continued its journey, adapting, shifting, finding new ways to flow, new ways to be. We too often encounter such moments in our own lives. Moments when a path seems to disappear, when a relationship dissolves, when an old way of being sinks beneath the surface, leaving behind a dry, empty space. We might resist these changes. We might cling to the memory of the river as it once was, to the clear, defined banks, to the familiar song. We might fear that once the river disappears, it is gone forever, that something vital has been irrevocably lost. But what if we could trust the hidden journey? What if we could allow ourselves to let go of clinging to the surface appearance, to the familiar form, and embrace the quiet truth that the essence, the flow of life itself, continues, even when unseen? What if we could find peace in its inevitable unfolding, knowing that even in disappearance, there is preparation, there is filtering, there is an unseen strengthening, a gentle breath now. Feel it soften in your chest. Allow yourself to let go of any tension, any resistance you might feel to the flow of life. Simply breathe and allow yourself to be held in this quiet moment of unfolding. We are invited to confront our own resistance to change. We hold on to old ideas, old identities, old comforts, even when they no longer serve us, even when life itself is gently, persistently nudging us to let go. We see the dissolving of the salt, the washing away of the clay, the disappearing of the river, and our hearts might tighten, fearing the unknown, fearing the emptiness that seems to follow. But true peace, true contentment, lies not in the futile attempt to stop the river's flow, to grasp at what is ever changing. It lies instead in embracing the quiet wisdom of impermanence. It lies in understanding that the very nature of existence is dynamic, fluid, a constant dance of arising and passing away. When we resist this flow, when we cling to fixed forms, we create our own suffering. We're like a hand trying to grasp water, only to find it slipping through our fingers. But when we open our hand, when we relax our grip, the water is still there, flowing freely, touching us gently, nourishing us in its passage. So, let us find peace in its inevitable unfolding. Let us look at the changes in our lives, not as interruptions to be endured, but as opportunities for deeper clarity, for unseen strengthening, for a richer, more profound emergence. The river always finds its way, the essence always remains, and in every ending, in every dissolution, in every quiet shift, there is a promise of renewal, a new beginning waiting to emerge, clearer and stronger than before. We are not meant to be static, to be unchanging. We are like the river, constantly flowing, constantly transforming, constantly finding new paths, new depths. And in this constant movement, in this beautiful impermanence, lies the very essence of life, vibrant and free. Vibrant and free. Tonight, our journey spirals deeper still, beyond the gentle flow of impermanence, into the quiet heart of what truly is. We come now to understand the spaciousness of emptiness and the profound, intricate dance of interconnectedness that weaves all things into a single, seamless tapestry. This is not an emptiness that frightens, nor a connection that binds, but an understanding that liberates, allowing us to see the world with fresh eyes, to hear its deeper song. Let us return to Bhima, the woodcutter who once feared his own shadow. He saw it as a sinister entity, a dark twin, pursuing him through the sun-dappled forest, a separate, unwelcome presence. He tried to outrun it, to escape its silent companionship, believing it to be something distinct from himself, something alien. But Bhima eventually came to understand that his shadow was not an enemy. It was not a separate entity at all. It was merely a relational aspect of light, of his own form, and of the ground upon which he walked. The shadow, in its very essence, is empty of independent existence. It has no substance, no form of its own. It cannot exist without the light, without Bhima's body, without the surface to receive its image. It arises because of these conditions and dissolves when those conditions change. Its emptiness is not a void, but a perfect reflection of its utter dependence, its complete interconnectedness with all that creates it. It is a constant, faithful companion, precisely because it is so intimately woven into the very fabric of Bhima's being and his world. It is a quiet reminder that what we perceive as separate or threatening is often an inseparable part of ourselves,
arising in relation to everything else. And remember Gopal, the fisherman's net mender, whose skilled hands tirelessly wove and rewove, believing his life was full of holes, unable to hold on to anything meaningful. He saw the threads as substance, as what was, and the holes as absence, as what was not, as failures. He strove to make the net perfect, to eliminate the holes, to grasp and hold. But a small child, with the clear sight of an unburdened heart, showed him a different truth. The fish were not escaping the holes. They were dancing through them. Gopal looked closer, and in that quiet observation, he began to understand. The holes were not failures. They were not an absence of meaning. They were essential. Without the spaces between the threads, the net would be a solid sheet, unable to flow with the water, unable to be cast, unable to perform its function. The holes were the very pathways that allowed the river to flow through, that allowed life to dance and weave, that created the capacity for the net to be a net. The net, in its true nature, is not just the threads, nor just the holes. It is both, in an intricate, interdependent dance. The emptiness of the holes creates the possibility of its purpose, of its connection with the water and the fish. It is a testament to the truth that what seems absent or empty is often what creates capacity and possibility. We cling to forms. We grasp at what is solid and visible, fearing the spaces in between, fearing the emptiness. But what if emptiness is not a void to be filled, but a spaciousness to be embraced? What if what seems absent is precisely what allows for presence? Imagine, if you will, a simple wooden flute. A master craftsman takes a piece of fine, aged wood. He carves it with precision, smooths its surface until it gleams, polishes it until it feels warm and alive beneath the fingertips. He might adorn it with delicate carvings, with patterns that tell ancient stories. But the most crucial part of his work, the part that transforms a beautiful piece of wood into a musical instrument, is the hollowing out. He must carefully, painstakingly, bore a perfect tunnel through its center. He must then carve smaller, round holes along its length, each one placed with exactitude. Without this hollowing, without these empty spaces, the flute would remain a silent stick, beautiful perhaps, but mute. It is the emptiness within, the absence of wood, that allows the breath to pass through. It is the emptiness of the finger holes, the absence of obstruction, that allows the various notes to arise. The sound, the melody, the very music of the flute does not come from the wood itself. It comes from the breath passing through the empty spaces, vibrating against the edges of those absences. The music is born of emptiness. It is created by what is not there, as much as by what is there. The spaciousness within the flute, the open pathways of its holes, are not flaws to be filled, but essential capacities that allow for the unfolding of beauty, for the expression of sound. And consider the sound itself. It is fleeting, impermanent. It arises, resonates for a moment, and then dissolves back into silence. The music exists only in the interplay of breath, wood, and the empty spaces. It depends on the player, on the air, on the very structure of the flute. It is empty of independent, lasting existence, yet it is profoundly real, profoundly beautiful in its moment of arising. This is the quiet wisdom of emptiness, or shunyata. It is not a nihilistic void, but a dynamic spaciousness,
full of potential, allowing for the dance of existence to unfold. It reminds us that things are not inherently fixed or separate, but are always in relation, always in process, always empty of a solid, unchanging self. Perhaps in our own lives, we too often try to fill every space, to grasp every moment, to hold on to every form. We fear the quiet spaces, the moments of pause, the perceived absences. We might feel a need to fill the emptiness within ourselves with activity, with noise, with constant seeking. But what if that very spaciousness, that quiet emptiness, is where true capacity lies? What if it is the space between our thoughts that allows for clarity? What if it is the space between our tasks that allows for rest and renewal? What if it is the quiet openness of our hearts that allows for compassion to flow? A gentle breath now. Feel it soften in your chest. Allow your attention to rest on the spaciousness within your own body. Feel the expanse of your lungs as they fill and empty, creating space for life. Feel the quiet spaciousness behind your eyes, the open field of awareness in your mind. Notice the space around you, the air that gently touches your skin, the distance between yourself and the sounds you hear. Allow yourself to simply be in this spaciousness. There is nothing to fill, nothing to do, nowhere to go. Simply rest in this open, expansive awareness. Feel the quiet peace that arises when you allow for this spaciousness, when you let go of the need to grasp or to fill. And as we rest in this spaciousness, we begin to glimpse the profound truth of interconnectedness, of dependent origination. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything arises in relation to everything else. Just as Bhima's shadow depends on the light, and Gopal's net depends on its holes and its threads, so too are all things woven together, arising in a beautiful, intricate dance of interdependence. Bhima's journey to embrace his shadow was not just about him and his fear. It was about the sun that cast the shadow, the earth that received it, the very nature of light and form. His understanding blossomed from the interplay of these elements. Mira's discovery of sweetness in giving honey was not solely her own. It depended on the diligent bees, the blooming flowers, the rich earth that nourished them, the sun that warmed the nectar, and the quiet act of offering to others. Her sweetness arose from a web of connections. Sonu's realization that unshaped clay has its own purpose was intimately tied to the river that shaped it, the monsoon rains that flowed over it, the earth from which it came, and the potters who would eventually transform it. His purpose was not an isolated thing, but a relational unfolding. Kamala's fire, which grew by sharing, was dependent on the dried dung that carried it, the dry grass that provided new fuel, the air that fed it, and the very act of giving that allowed it to spread. Her inner light was amplified by its interaction with the world. Tejo's discovery of the inner drum, the steady beat of his own heart, arose from the silence left by the destruction of his external drums, from the quiet space that allowed him to finally listen within. His rhythm was always there, dependent on his attention. Devi's taste of sweetness in dilution was dependent on the rain that softened the salt, the vastness of the sea that held it, the very nature of water and mineral, and her openness to perceive the subtle. Her flavor was a delicate balance of relations. Gopal's insight into the joy of the holes in his net was dependent on the threads that framed them, the water that flowed through them, and the tiny fish that danced within them, showing him a new way of seeing. His wholeness arose from these interactions. Leela's understanding that she was bestowing blessings, transforming waste into warmth and shelter, was dependent on the humble dung she gathered, the mud she mixed, the crumbling walls she mended, and the people who found refuge in the homes she created. Her sacred act was deeply interwoven with the needs of others. Nanda's learning that wounding could lead to stronger growth was dependent on the tree he stripped, the storm that tested it, the new bark that grew, and his patient observation of nature's resilience. His strength was born from this gentle dance of challenge and recovery, and Venu's profound realization that he carried the potential of new life in the ashes was dependent on the fire that consumed, the bodies that returned to dust, the fallow field that received them, and the earth that brought forth new crops. His peace arose from seeing the full cycle of transformation. We begin to see how each of these journeys, though unique, are not separate, fixed entities. They are threads in a single vast tapestry. The wind that rustles the leaves in Bhima's forest might carry the scent of pine to Mira as she gathers honey, and that same wind could stir the waters of the river where Sonu digs his clay. The light that casts Bhima's shadow is the same light that warms Kamala's embers and glints off Devi's salt flats. The earth that provides Sonu's clay also nourishes the trees Nanda tends and receives Venu's ashes. Our own lives, our own joys and sorrows, our own awakenings are similarly interwoven. We are not isolated islands, but intricate parts of a boundless ocean. Every thought, every action, every breath arises in relation to countless other conditions and beings. We are empty of an independent, unchanging self, and it is this very emptiness that allows for our boundless interconnectedness, our capacity to influence and be influenced, to give and to receive, to dance in the vibrant flow of existence. In this understanding, the idea of separate, fixed entities begins to dissolve like Devi's salt in the rain, like Sonu's clay in the river. We are all interdependent, all arising together, all reflections of the same vast, open, and luminous reality. This is not a complex philosophy to be grasped by the mind, but a gentle truth to be felt in the heart, a profound sense of belonging, a quiet liberation from the burden of believing we are alone or separate. We are invited to rest in this understanding, to see the world not as a collection of separate objects and beings, but as a dynamic, interconnected dance, to feel ourselves not as isolated individuals, but as an integral, essential part of this beautiful, unfolding whole. And in this vast, interconnected dance lies a deep, abiding peace, a quiet joy that arises from knowing we are always held, always connected, always part of something infinitely larger and more profound than we could ever imagine. We turn our hearts now to a different kind of unfolding. From the spaciousness of emptiness and the intricate web of interconnection, we move to the active cultivation of that which flows most freely from an open heart, compassion. We speak of metta, loving kindness, the gentle warmth that seeks the well-being of all beings. This is not a passive state, but a radiant energy, an inner fire that grows brighter with every spark it shares. We recall Kamala, the firekeeper's daughter, whose quiet despair was that her inner light might diminish as she gave it away. She worried that her flame would die, leaving the village cold, leaving her own heart empty. She carried her embers with a hurried step,
a subtle weariness in her gentle voice, believing that each spark she shared was a piece of herself, lost forever. But then, in a moment of accidental grace, she saw the truth. A dropped ember, instead of dying, found new fuel in the dry grass. It did not consume itself into nothingness. No, it spread. It found new life, new warmth, new light, carrying itself across the ground, growing and amplifying its presence. Kamala learned that fire does not diminish by sharing. It finds new fuel wherever it goes, growing and spreading its warmth. True giving, she discovered, generates more, not less. Her inner fire was not a finite resource to be hoarded, but a living, breathing essence that expanded with every act of generosity. Her flame found its deepest strength in its giving, and we recall Leela, the dung plasterer, who saw her work as handling filth, a source of constant contamination. Despite the cleansing beauty it brought to others' homes, her hands, though strong and skilled, felt perpetually smudged, her inner world shadowed by a sense of impurity. Yet, as she plastered the crumbling wall of a poor widow, transforming a fragile structure into a place of warmth and shelter, a profound realization dawned. What she had called filth was not filth at all. It was a blessing. It was a sacred act of transforming waste into protection and beauty. Through her rough, strong hands, humble materials became a sanctuary. Her work, once a source of quiet shame, became an act of profound compassion, of bestowing comfort and safety upon another. She was not spreading contamination. She was spreading goodness, transforming and elevating the very materials she touched, and in doing so, elevating her own spirit. Both Kamala and Leela, in their own ways, discovered the generative power of giving. They found that the true wellspring of inner strength and joy is not found in accumulation, nor in guarding what we perceive as our own, but in the open-hearted flow of compassion. It is in the allowing, the offering, the sharing of whatever we have to give, be it light or shelter, or simply the intention of kindness. Imagine now a quiet garden. It is not a grand, sprawling estate, but a humble, walled-in space, tended by a solitary gardener, whose name is never spoken, whose face is rarely seen. This gardener works with a quiet diligence, a gentle persistence that seems to merge with the very earth. Each morning, before the sun has fully warmed the stones, the gardener walks the paths, observing, listening, feeling the subtle shifts in the soil, the quiet thirst of the plants. The soil in this garden is not naturally rich. It is a mixture of ordinary earth, perhaps a little stony, a little dry. But the gardener does not lament this. Instead, with patient hands, the gardener brings in simple offerings, fallen leaves from the forest, the finely ground husks of grains, perhaps a handful of ash from a cooking fire, or the rich, dark compost of discarded fruit and vegetable peels. These are gently mixed, slowly worked into the earth, not with force, but with a quiet, rhythmic turning. The soil is nourished, not through grand gestures, but through continuous, humble acts of care. The gardener waters the plants, not with a gushing stream, but with a gentle, steady trickle, allowing the water to soak deeply, slowly, into the roots. The weeds, too, are removed, not with anger, but with a careful hand, recognizing their right to exist, but gently guiding them to another patch where they might thrive without hindering the delicate blooms. There is no rush, no urgency, only a profound patience,
a quiet devotion to the well-being of the garden. And in this garden, the most fragrant blooms begin to appear. They are not exotic, flamboyant flowers, but simple, unassuming blossoms, perhaps the delicate white jasmine, or the soft pink lotus, or the subtle yellow champaka. Their colors are gentle, their forms elegant in their simplicity. But their fragrance, their fragrance is extraordinary. It does not stay confined within the garden walls. No, it rises with the morning mist, it drifts with the afternoon breeze, it settles with the evening dew. This fragrance is a gift. It spreads beyond the garden, carried on the air, touching all who pass by. The weary traveler on the dusty road catches a hint of it, and their step lightens, their heart softens. The busy merchant, rushing to market, inhales it for a fleeting moment, and a quiet smile touches their lips. The child at play stops for a second, wondering at the sweet, unseen presence. The elder, resting on a nearby bench, simply breathes it in and feels a deep sense of peace settle within them. The gardener does not cultivate these blooms for praise, nor for profit, nor even for personal pleasure alone. The gardener cultivates them with an open heart, with a quiet dedication to the flourishing of life itself. And in this act of selfless tending, the garden does not diminish. The fragrance does not fade. Indeed, the more the gardener tends, the more vibrant the blooms become, the more generously they offer their sweet perfume to the world. The act of giving, of nurturing, of pouring gentle care into the garden amplifies its beauty and its bounty. The fragrance becomes richer, the colors more vivid, the garden itself a testament to the generative power of compassion. This, then, is the nature of true inner fire, of metta, loving kindness. It is not a finite resource that we must guard and dole out sparingly. It is a wellspring deep within us that grows with every drop we offer. It is a flame that, like Kamala's ember, finds new fuel in every act of generosity, spreading its warmth and light to all it touches, and in so doing, becoming brighter, more expansive, more potent within ourselves. A calming breath now. Feel it settle deep within your chest. As you breathe in, imagine gathering a gentle warmth, a soft, golden light into the center of your heart. And as you breathe out, allow that warmth, that light, to spread. Feel it expand gently through your chest, softening any tension, dissolving any tightness. Feel it flow down your arms, into your hands, out through your fingertips. Feel it spread down through your torso, into your legs, all the way to your feet, grounding you. Allow this warmth to radiate outward, beyond the boundaries of your skin. Imagine it gently touching those nearest to you, those you love. Feel it expanding further, encompassing your home, your community, your village, your town. Let it extend to all beings, everywhere, without exception. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. This warmth, this loving kindness, is not diminished by its giving. It is amplified. It is the very nature of the wellspring within you. The more you allow it to flow, the more abundantly it replenishes itself. Just as the gardener's quiet tending brings forth ever more fragrant blooms, so too does the gentle cultivation of compassion within your own heart nourish and expand your capacity for peace and joy. The deepest wellspring of peace and joy, we discover, comes not from seeking for oneself, not from accumulating, not from controlling, but from the open-hearted giving of compassion. It is in the simple act of wishing well, of offering kindness, of tending to the garden of our own hearts with gentle care that we find our greatest fulfillment. Kamala found her inner fire was not consumed, but multiplied by its sharing. Leela found her hands were not contaminated, but consecrated by their service. Mira, the honey-gatherer, found the true sweetness in making for others, not in consuming for herself. Each of these gentle souls, in their own way, came to understand that the truest gifts are those given freely, and that in the act of giving, the heart itself becomes richer, more spacious, more radiant. This is the profound, quiet truth of metta. It is a flame that burns brighter the more it is fanned, a spring that flows more freely the more it is drawn upon, a garden that blooms more richly the more it is tended. It is an inexhaustible source of peace, a boundless fount of joy, residing always within your own gentle heart, waiting only for your open-hearted invitation to spread its warmth to the world. There is nothing to force, nothing to strive for. Simply allow this warmth to be. Allow this compassion to flow. Rest in the understanding that your capacity for kindness is limitless, and that in its expression, you do not diminish, but become more fully, more beautifully, yourself. This is the gentle climax of this understanding, the realization that the deepest wellspring of peace and joy comes not from a frantic search outside, but from the quiet, open-hearted giving of compassion from within. It is a profound, subtle shift, a reorientation of our entire being towards generosity and kindness. And in this reorientation, a deep, abiding contentment settles within the heart. It is a quiet, powerful knowing that to give is to receive, and to share our inner light is to make it shine all the more brightly. Tonight, our journey guides us deeper still towards an understanding of the self that is not made, but revealed. We have spoken of becoming more fully, more beautifully ourselves. But what if this becoming is not a striving, not an acquisition, but rather a quiet, gentle uncovering of what has always been intrinsically, perfectly whole? What if the most profound wisdom, the truest rhythm of our being, already resides within us, waiting only for our patient ear? This part of our path invites us to listen. It invites us to turn our attention away from the clamor of the world, away from the endless definitions and expectations that swirl around us, and to listen instead to the quiet, constant wisdom that beats within. It is a wisdom that needs no words, no grand pronouncements. It is simply there, a steady, gentle pulse, the inner drum of our own true self. Let us recall Tejo, the drum maker. His hands were skilled, his workshop vibrant with the sounds of his craft. He made magnificent instruments, drums that sang with deep, resonant voices, drums that called forth rhythm and celebration. Yet, despite all this external sound, Tejo was haunted by a profound silence within himself. He felt a void, an emptiness that he tirelessly tried to fill by creating more and more sound outside. He believed that if only he could make enough drums, if only his world was filled with enough external rhythm, then perhaps that inner silence would finally be banished. He was so busy creating, so busy making, so busy listening to the sounds that emanated from wood and hide, that he failed to hear the most fundamental drum of all. He was distracted by the external, by the magnificent forms he brought into being, believing that his worth, his very self, was tied to these creations. But then, as you remember, the termites came. Silently, meticulously, they consumed all his drums, leaving his workshop empty, leaving him with an absolute echoing silence. There was nothing left to make, nowhere left to turn for sound, and it was in that profound, unyielding quiet, in the complete absence of external rhythm, that Tejo finally heard it. Not a sound from the outside, but a gentle thrumming from deep within his own chest. Thump, 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 thump. It was the steady, unwavering beat of his own heart. This was the true drum, the most essential rhythm, the constant, silent pulse of his own life. He had been so focused on making sound that he had forgotten the drum that was already playing within. He had been so busy defining himself by what he made that he had overlooked what he already was. Tejo's journey was one of uncovering. He didn't become a drum. He recognized the drum that had always been there, quietly beating, the fundamental rhythm of his own inherent being, obscured only by the noise he had created around it. The path to peace for him was not about filling a void, but about listening to the fullness that already existed. It was about recognizing that the self he sought to define through his craft was always present, always whole, always beating its own unique, perfect rhythm. And let us also recall Nanda, the bark stripper. He moved through the forest with such care, so gentle in his work, stripping bark without harming the trees. Yet, he feared he was stripping away his own protection, becoming too sensitive, too exposed to the world. He worried that in the act of revealing the inner layers of the tree, he was also revealing a vulnerability within himself that might leave him wounded and diminished. He saw the act of stripping as a removal, a loss of something essential, a weakening of the outer shell. But the forest, in its quiet wisdom, showed him another truth. During a fierce storm, Nanda took shelter against a tree he had stripped many years ago. And what he found was not a weakened trunk, not a damaged form, but a new bark, grown back thicker, stronger, more resilient than before. The tree had not been diminished by the stripping. It had been transformed. What seemed like a wound, an opening, had become a catalyst for deeper, more authentic growth. The tree had become more fully itself, not less, through its process of recovery and regeneration. Nanda realized that by allowing the outer layers to be shed, the tree had accessed a deeper, inherent strength. It had not lost its essence, it had strengthened it. In the same way, Nanda came to understand that the perceived stripping away of his own defenses, his own outer shells, was not a weakening, but an invitation to allow his true self, his deeper, more authentic nature, to grow forth, to become more resilient, more fully embodied. He had been afraid of the anatta, the not self, the letting go of superficial layers, but in doing so, he discovered a deeper, truer, stronger self that was always waiting to emerge. We too are often distracted by external noise. We listen to the opinions of others, the expectations of society, the relentless chatter of our own minds. We define ourselves by our roles, our possessions, our achievements, our failures. We are told who we should be, what we should strive for, what we should accumulate. This external clamor creates a thick layer, a dense bark around that quiet inner drum. It makes it difficult to hear the steady beat of our own inherent wisdom, our own unique rhythm.
We become accustomed to living on the surface, responding to every external stimulus, believing that our identity is a fragile thing, constantly needing to be built, protected, or defined by the world outside. We chase after external sounds, external forms, external validations, hoping they will fill an inner void, much like Tejo, or protect a perceived vulnerability, much like Nanda. But in this constant outward focus, we lose touch with the profound, quiet truth that lies within. Imagine a sculptor, a master of stone, who stands before a vast, unshaped block of marble. The stone is heavy, rough, seemingly without form. But the sculptor does not see a blank canvas. No, the sculptor sees the perfect form already waiting within. The sculptor understands that the beautiful statue, the elegant figure, is not something to be added to the stone. It is already there, held captive by the excess material that surrounds it. The sculptor picks up the chisel, not to create, but to reveal. With each gentle tap, each careful stroke, a small piece of stone falls away. There is no force, no struggle, only a patient, deliberate removal of what is not essential. The sculptor works with quiet reverence, listening to the stone, allowing the inherent form to guide the hand. Chip by chip, flake by flake, the extraneous material is shed. The rough edges soften, the hidden curves begin to emerge. Slowly, softly, the perfect form, which had always been present, begins to reveal itself. The sculptor is not making something new. The sculptor is simply uncovering what has always been intrinsically whole and clear, what has always been waiting to be seen. The beauty was never created. It was always there, an inherent potential, waiting to be liberated from its coverings. This parable of the sculptor holds a deep truth for us. We too are like that block of marble. Within each of us resides a perfect form, an inherent Buddha nature, a boundless wisdom, a quiet, essential self that is already whole, already complete, already at peace. It is not something we need to achieve or strive for or build. It is not something that needs to be earned or constructed. It is simply there, waiting to be uncovered. Our lives, our experiences, our conditioning, our fears, our external definitions, these are like the excess stone, the outer layers that obscure this perfect form. We spend so much time trying to chisel ourselves into something we think we should be, adding layers, trying to create a new self, when the real work is often one of gentle removal. It is the patient, compassionate letting go of what is not truly us, of what covers our intrinsic wholeness. A mindful breath now. Settle deep within yourself. Feel the quiet stillness that resides beneath the surface of your thoughts, beneath the sensations of your body. Connect to this inner stillness. This is the space where the inner drum beats. This is the space where your inherent wisdom, your true self, resides. As you breathe in, imagine gathering a sense of quiet awareness into this inner space. And as you breathe out, imagine gently releasing any external definitions, any expectations, any noise that obscures your inner knowing. Let go of the need to be anything other than what you are, right now. This is the beginning of a profound resolution. The path to peace is not about becoming someone new, not about adding more to ourselves, not about fitting into a preconceived mold. No, it is about recognizing that the peace, the joy, the completeness we seek is not something external to be acquired, but something internal to be uncovered. It is about gently removing the layers of misunderstanding, of fear, of striving,
that prevent us from seeing clearly what has always been intrinsically whole and clear within us. Like Tejo, we learn to listen to the drum that already plays. Like Nanda, we understand that shedding old layers allows for stronger, truer growth. Like the sculptor, we realize that the perfect form is not made, but revealed. This profound, quiet wisdom, this recognition of our inherent Buddha nature, is not a destination we arrive at, but a truth we continuously unveil. A constant, gentle turning inward to the boundless wellspring of peace that has always been our deepest essence. We begin to understand that we do not need to seek our true self in the external world, for it has always resided within. We do not need to strive to become whole, for we are already intrinsically so. This is the gentle unfolding, the quiet revelation that our path leads us towards. It is a profound liberation, a deep sense of resting in the understanding that our most essential being is already perfect, already complete, already at peace. And so, we stand at a quiet threshold, having journeyed deep into the heart of these gentle teachings. We have explored the wisdom of the forest, the river, the sea, and the rhythms of daily life. We have seen how ordinary moments, humble crafts, and simple observations can unveil profound truths. Each soul we met, each story we shared, was a thread in a larger tapestry, woven with patience and care. Now, as our journey nears its gentle close, we begin to gather these threads, to see how they interlace, forming a single, radiant truth that encompasses all. Remember Venu, the ash collector, whose life was shadowed by the residue of endings. He carried the weight of what had passed, believing it to be a burden, a mark of sorrow. He sought to cleanse himself, to escape the pervasive grayness that clung to him. But in a quiet, unexpected moment, he scattered the ashes not into the river, but onto fallow ground. And there, from what seemed like the very essence of death, sprang forth the richest, most vibrant life. Venu learned that endings are never truly endings, but concentrated beginnings. He discovered that within the cessation of one form lies the potent seed of another, waiting for fertile ground, waiting to nourish and transform. He was not carrying death's burden. He was carrying the vibrant potential of new life. And remember Bhima, the strong woodcutter, whose broad shoulders carried not only his axe, but also a deep, persistent fear of his own shadow. He saw it as a sinister entity, a dark follower, always present, always threatening. He tried to outrun it, to escape it, to deny its very existence. He worked only in the brightest light, hoping to banish it. But in the deepening twilight, when his shadow finally dissolved and disappeared, a profound loneliness washed over him. In that moment of shadowlessness, he realized that what he had feared, what he had tried so desperately to avoid, had been his constant, faithful companion all along. His shadow was not an enemy, but an inseparable part of his being, a silent witness to his every step, a defining counterpoint to the light. It was a mirror, reflecting his own presence in the world. Venu's journey speaks to anicca, impermanence, showing us that change is not a loss to be mourned, but a constant transformation that brings forth new life. The end of one thing is merely the quiet beginning of another, a continuous cycle of unfolding. The ashes, once a symbol of finality, became a testament to renewal, a powerful reminder that nothing is truly lost, only reshaped, reborn. He came to accept that life's most profound beauty
often emerges from its most humble, quiet dissolutions. Bhima's journey speaks to shunyata, emptiness, and dependent origination. His shadow was not an independent entity, but a relational aspect of light, of his own presence. It was empty of inherent, separate existence, yet full of meaning in its connection to him, to the sun, to the earth. He learned that what seemed like an absence, a dark void, was actually an essential part of his wholeness, defining his very form. He saw that all things are interconnected, arising in dependence upon each other, and that even our perceived fears and flaws are often woven into the rich tapestry of our being, offering us companionship, inviting us to see ourselves more fully. Consider how these profound understandings weave together with all we have learned. The unshaped clay of Sonu, seemingly formless, yet finding its own way to meet the world, its own purpose in the flow of the river, reminds us that emptiness is not a void, but spaciousness, ripe with possibility. The delicate beauty of dilution that Devi discovered, the quiet sweetness found in simplicity, echoes Venu's understanding that concentrated life can emerge from gentle scattering, that true richness is not always in accumulation, but in balance and flow. The holes in Gopal's net, once seen as failures, revealed themselves as pathways for joy and connection, allowing life to dance through. This, too, is a lesson in emptiness, that the spaces, the perceived absences, are as vital as the forms, creating capacity, allowing for movement, for relationship. They are not to be feared or filled, but embraced as essential to the whole. Kamala's fire, which did not diminish by sharing but found new fuel, growing and spreading its warmth, illustrates metta, the boundless wellspring of compassion within. Like the ashes of Venu, which nourish the field, true giving, true loving kindness, is not a depletion but an amplification. It creates more, not less, finding infinite fuel in the act of generosity. Leela, transforming waste into blessing, turning humble dung into warmth and shelter, showed us that even what we deem impure or discarded can, through compassionate action, become a source of profound benefit, a sacred act of transformation. And Tejo, the drum maker, who found his most essential rhythm within, and Nanda, the bark stripper, who discovered that what seemed like a wound could lead to stronger, more authentic growth. Their stories speak to anatta, the uncovering of our true self. They understood that the deepest wisdom, the most profound peace, is not found by building up external sounds or external protections, but by gently shedding what is not essential, by listening to the quiet, constant beat of our own inherent nature. Just as Venu saw new life in ashes and Bhima found companionship in his shadow, Tejo and Nanda realized that wholeness is not about adding, but about revealing what has always been intrinsically present. All of these teachings, impermanence, emptiness, interconnectedness, compassion, and the inherent wisdom of our true self, are not separate paths, but facets of a single, radiant truth. They are interwoven, each reflecting and enhancing the other, like the many colors of a single rainbow, or the countless ripples from a single drop in a still pond. To truly understand one is to begin to glimpse them all. This integrated wisdom leads us to a profound yet simple way of being in the world. It is a way of quiet acceptance, of deep trust, of a gentle release from the need to strive or control. It is the understanding that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived, a journey to be walked, step by sacred step. Let us consider a simple village elder, a woman named Anya, whose hands were gnarled from a lifetime of working the earth, and whose eyes held the quiet wisdom of countless sunsets. Anya had spent many years seeking. She had walked to distant temples, listened to revered teachers, meditated in silent caves, and read ancient scrolls by the light of a flickering lamp. She sought enlightenment. She sought ultimate truth. She sought the end of suffering, the final resting place of peace. She had diligently followed every path laid before her, believing that each path led to a specific destination, a peak to be climbed, a hidden treasure to be unearthed. She walked with earnestness, sometimes with a heavy heart, sometimes with a hopeful one, always with the conviction that somewhere, at the end of all her striving, she would find what she was looking for. One day, after many decades of searching, Anya sat beneath a great banyan tree, its roots reaching deep into the earth, its branches spreading wide like open arms. She felt a familiar weariness, a gentle ache in her bones. But this time, it was different. There was no frustration, no despair, only a quiet, profound stillness. She looked back at all the paths she had walked, the dusty roads, the mountain trails, the riverbanks, the forest clearings. She remembered the effort, the striving, the hope, the disappointment. And then, in that moment of quiet reflection, a profound understanding settled in her heart, soft as a feather. She saw that all along, she had been so focused on the destination that she had missed the very essence of the journey. The truth she sought was not waiting for her at the end of a path. It was present in every single step she had taken. The dust on her feet was sacred. The ache in her legs was sacred. The sun on her face, the wind in her hair, the sound of the birds, the quiet murmur of her own breath. All of it was part of the truth. The moments of struggle, the moments of joy, the moments of confusion, the moments of clarity. They were not obstacles to be overcome to reach a destination. They were the destination. The path itself was the destination. She realized that the peace she had sought was not a prize at the end of a long race, but a quality of presence in each and every step. The enlightenment she yearned for was not a sudden burst of blinding light, but the soft illumination that came from simply being fully present, fully awake to the unfolding of each moment, exactly as it was. She understood that whether she walked in the bright light of midday or the lengthening shadow of evening, whether the path was smooth or rocky, whether her heart felt light or heavy, every single step was sacred. Every breath was a moment of arrival. Every experience was a teacher. The journey was not a means to an end. It was the end itself. It was the living, breathing expression of the truth she had sought. From that day forward, Anya continued to walk. But her walking was different. There was no striving, no grasping, no desperate search for what lay ahead. There was only a quiet, profound presence. Each step was taken with a gentle acceptance, a deep reverence for the path beneath her feet, for the world around her, and for the wisdom unfolding within her. She walked with a soft smile, carrying the understanding that she was already home, already at peace, already whole. This is a gentle invitation that this interwoven wisdom extends to us now, to release the need to strive, to control, to grasp for a future moment of perfection,
to soften our hearts and minds to the understanding that life cycles, its constant flow of beginnings and endings, its interplay of light and shadow, its moments of fullness and its moments of spaciousness, are not something to be resisted or overcome. They simply are. And in that simple acceptance, in that gentle allowing, lies a profound peace. A long, soft breath now. Allow yourself to settle. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Feel the quiet stillness within. Let go of any remaining tension, any need to fix or change anything. Simply rest in this moment, held by the understanding that the path is unfolding perfectly, just as it should. We are invited to live this wisdom, not as a set of rules, but as a way of being, to see the potential for new life in every ending, to find companionship in what we once feared, to discover that spaciousness allows for joy, to understand that sharing our light only makes it grow, to hear the quiet drum of our own heart, and to trust the inherent wholeness that resides within. This is the integration. This is the synthesis. This is the quiet unfolding of understanding that allows the heart to soften and the mind to settle. It is a release from the burdens we carry, a gentle acceptance of life's intricate dance. We are preparing now for the final resting, the quiet arrival, knowing that the journey itself was the destination, and every moment, every breath, every step is sacred. Tonight, we complete our journey. We've explored the quiet wisdom in the rustling leaves, by the murmuring river, and in the steady rhythms of daily life. We have walked alongside these gentle souls, witnessing their quiet awakenings, their subtle shifts in perception. Each step taken, each story heard, has been a thread woven into a larger tapestry of understanding. We met Bhima, the strong woodcutter, who once fled from his own shadow. He learned, in the deepening twilight, that what he feared most was, in truth, his constant, faithful companion. He discovered that fear, when embraced, can transform into friendship, a steadfast presence that walks with us, always. We journeyed with Mira, the nimble honey-gatherer, whose palate had grown numb to the sweetness she collected. She found, in watching the tireless bees, that the deepest sweetness was not in consumption, but in the pure, open-hearted act of making and giving for others. Her own fullness was amplified, not diminished, by her generous spirit. We sat by the river with Sonu, the clay digger, who felt his life was formless, unshaped, without purpose. He watched the river's gentle flow interact with his raw clay, and understood that even unformed material holds its own way of being in the world, its own quiet purpose. Formlessness, he learned, is not an absence, but a boundless potential waiting to meet the world. We walked with Kamala, the firekeeper's daughter, who feared her inner light was dying with each ember she shared. She witnessed a dropped spark find new fuel, spreading its warmth, and knew that fire does not diminish by sharing. It grows, it finds new pathways, ever expanding. True giving, she understood, generates more, not less. We listened with Tejo, the drum maker, whose world was filled with external sound, yet haunted by an inner silence. In the quiet wreckage of his workshop, he finally heard the soft, steady thump-thump of his own heart, the essential rhythm that had been playing within him all along. He learned that the true drum, the most profound sound, beats from the very core of our being. We stood on the glistening flats with Devi, the salt harvester, whose life tasted bland, despite her daily work with pure flavor. She saw her carefully gathered salt dissolve back into the rain and tasted the delicate, refreshing sweetness of the water itself. She realized that true beauty can be found not just in concentration, but in the subtle balance of dilution, in the quiet simplicity of what is. We mended nets with Gopal, the fisherman's net mender, who felt his own life was full of holes, unable to hold anything meaningful. A child's innocent observation revealed that the holes were not failures, but pathways for life and flow, for connection and play. The openings, he understood, are essential, allowing the dance of existence to move freely. We saw with Leela, the dung plasterer, who felt permanently tainted by her work, despite the shelter she created. As she smoothed the walls of a humble home, she realized that what she had called filth was a sacred blessing, transforming waste into warmth, into protection, into beauty. Through her hands, humble materials became a sanctuary. We found shelter with Nanda, the bark stripper, who feared that by stripping bark, he was stripping away his own protection, becoming too vulnerable. Resting against a tree that had regrown stronger bark, he learned that what seems like wounding can be a catalyst for deeper, more authentic growth. Loss, he discovered, can lead to richer, more resilient life. And finally, we walked with Venu, the ash collector, who carried the pervasive gray sorrow of endings. When he accidentally scattered the ashes on fallow ground, he witnessed the flourishing of rich new life. He understood that he was not carrying death's burden, but the concentrated potential of new beginnings, pure possibility waiting to nourish the earth. Each of these quiet awakenings, each gentle turning, points to a profound, simple truth. It is a truth whispered by the wind, murmured by the river, and etched into the very fabric of existence. It is the understanding that peace is not found by seeking or by grasping, not by accumulating or by controlling, but by gently letting go. It is found by resting in the natural flow of life, exactly as it is, and by opening the heart to what is present in this very moment. The journey was not to find a distant destination, a final peak to conquer, but to soften the heart along the way, to allow the rigid walls of perception to dissolve, to let go of the burdens we carry, and to simply be present. This is the ultimate climax, the quiet arrival at a profound, unshakable peace that was always, always here. Allow your entire being to settle now. Feel the weight of your body, supported and held by the earth beneath you. Let your breath deepen, slowing, softening, finding its own gentle rhythm. There is nothing left to do, nowhere left to go, no one you need to become. Simply be here, in this quiet, peaceful space. The stories have unfolded. The lessons have been shared. They are not to be held tightly, but to be absorbed gently, like soft rain into thirsty soil, nourishing the quiet wisdom that already resides within you. You are not separate from the river's flow, or the steady beat of the inner drum, or the boundless light that grows with sharing. You are part of this intricate dance, this beautiful unfolding. You are whole. You are complete. You are already home. All is well. You are home. Rest now.